Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Hash Church, episode 14 from Hash Church 2.0. Welcome all Hash Church attendees. Last I checked, there was damn near 100 of you guys in the room. Well, that's wrong. There's 134 people in the room right now. So why don't we get started and send off these links to all of the people. I'm going to send off an email first. Oh, better go Hash Church. We'll send that off, and then we will send off the message over here. Boom, boom, bam, boom. Oops. It's always the challenge getting everyone the link. Geez, I'm looking forward to today's episode. Very, very stoked always to have Hilary Black and Forrest Hurd from the Caladrius Network. I'm super excited to have Valerie stop in and share with us. I haven't spoken with her in a long time. I have invited in Skunkman Sam as well. We'll see if he's able to make it. And yeah, let's just see here. I think we're good. I guess I would expect probably Etienne coming in before anyone else. He's usually the winning. Oh, look at that.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Valerie. Welcome.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very good. It's been some time.
It has been. It has been.
It has been, and not too shabby. You even beat Etienne into the room, and I'm telling you, that does not happen very often.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I've been ready for this connect.
No, it's all good.
So, life's good. Life's a lot of ways, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, life's busy. We've come a far way. I was actually watching the Nature of Things video that Hilary sent me the other day when she went down and visited you guys. That must be like 20 plus years ago now.
Oh God, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. It has been.
And then I guess I met you guys a few years later at Skunkman Sam's place in Amsterdam.
Oh, right. Well, I knew that we had met, but I couldn't place it. I thought that it might have been up north at the. Oh, darn my stem. I'll get in here. My computer's been misbehaving, but it's all right.
Well, we can hear you perfectly. We just can't see you, and that's okay. Some people
you don't need to see me. Great.
Yeah, exactly. Some people choose not to be seen.
I just got my makeup done.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Joking.
Well, I'm looking forward to today's discussion with everyone. I think that it's, Etienne's often with us being a pioneer down in California, but it's nice to have yourself. It's going to be great to have Hilary come in. I know she's in Ottawa right now. She's absolutely nonstop, and she's got some interesting things to share with us this morning. I've also invited Kirk Toussaw, a really well-spoken lawyer who now works for Canopy Growth as a consultant, but I saw him recently speak. I guess it was a cannabis conversation that he spoke at on the news with Bill Blair and a couple of others, and he was just so well-spoken that I wanted to get him in as well. Welcome, Hilary. How are you, sister?
Hi.
How you doing?
Yeah. See, I had to not beat Etienne. There you go. Hi. There.
Welcome back, Valerie.
Thank you. So good.
Yeah, so we're waiting on Forrest is going to be coming in a few minutes as well, and I sent out the invitation to the Dragonfly Earth Medicine as well as Wade Laughter. Always people that seem to really facilitate a great conversation, and of course people that are into this also up to their necks. And what I mean by this is just the whole, the activism, the growing, the educating, the sort of all these things that I guess the activism has turned into as we get more and more permissions and more capabilities to do these things. It
permissions?
grows.
No, we created our own permissions.
We did.
Yeah,
This is
and now it's an industry, right?
These two women before us are the pioneers. I mean, yes, you could consider me a pioneer, but we're the second generation. Valerie was first generation, definitely. Wonderful Hilary was a predecessor there as well. So I consider myself a secondary pioneer to these amazing ladies.
Hi, Valerie.
Sweet Hill. Hi, darling. How are you?
Oh, I was trying to remember the last time that I saw you in person. And I don't know if I've seen you since we filmed The Nature of Things in 1998. Like, have I seen you in person since then?
I think that we saw one another in
Some conference somewhere.
at a hemp thing up in the hemp.
Well, it has been
It's probably been 20 years then, a long time.
Let's try to find some event that we both want to go to and see if we can cross paths, because I sure would love to hug you again, lady.
That'd be lovely. I've been fewer cannabis events and more, more bedside events. That's more where I've been. Hey, Caladrius. Hi, you. I just see you bumped in here. Hell, it's so lovely to see you. You're beautiful. You haven't changed at all, except to grow in the way that we grow. I can't.
Thank you.
Well, you ignited a flame, let me tell you, Valerie, because Hilary has not stopped since she came back from California in 1998. And it's been like watching a comet across the sky. It's been very, very inspirational, to say the least. She's pulled a lot of good out of me. I feel that being just a helper and an assistant and someone who could help facilitate things for her. She always made me just feel like I felt great helping the club. I felt great being a part of anything that she was a part of. And I feel blessed to have been, the small part that I got to be in it and still be in it, and watching her do all these amazing things. And I know that you were a big part of that, Valerie. So thank you for that.
It was fun hanging out on the beach and on the mountain and playing, being playful.
It's wild rewatching that. What a baby I was, really. And I was literally 10 months into the Compassion Club. We were selling cannabis on a little tiny digital scale in a empty tea box was the thing that we were cannabis out in. And things really exploded after I got to come and spend some time with you. And you, Mark Richardson, I mean, you are have been a part of the work, but also you catch me, right? You say that I'm a comet, and I can't get so emotional that I'm teary in the first 5 minutes of Hash Church. But when I'm not being a comet and I burn out, you're one of the people that catches me. So thank you.
Happy to be here for it. I was reading when I made the Hash Church, I guess the pre-paragraph to explain who was going to be coming in. I did just a couple of Google searches on both of you. And the interesting thing that I found immediately in Valerie's story and in your stories, and it seemed like it was in the first couple of paragraphs of both stories that I brought up, were that you both, in all of this, have had guns put to your head by enforcement officers. And I just thought, oh my God, what a terrible thing to have in common, yet it's just this really real thing that we're a part of, that it can't be escaped, and that was pretty incredible for me to read, that you guys have that in common.
Has that happened to you more than once, Val?
Yeah, it has, but no, but, and the interesting thing that I think is that how all of us know a place within that's safe. I'm not saying that I feel safe with a gun to my head. That's not so, but that there's a place inside that knows. And maybe it is the experiences, well, certainly the experiences of our life lend to them, but the psychedelic or expanded experiences that reveal to us that there is a deep awareness and connection to self, and that we can and do find our way into that place. That's the place that protects us when internally, when the external becomes too much to bear. And people all over the world know that experience. Ours in in lieu of what is occurring throughout the planet at this time of polarization within our own country and from state to state, of national state, from country to country and internally, is profoundly important, I think, for me to have that experience so that I can both share, develop more compassion and share that internal experience and knowledge of that, to know that, deep fear, can breed deep resentment and anger, and it can also breed compassion, so that, perhaps those are the little ways, the human ways in a world of almost 8 billion people, that we share knowledge of one another, that we become better people, than this moment, from moment to moment. It's getting a whole lifetime to become a master. So I guess, we're just here trying to figure out how to be the master of self. And then all the rest falls away and is forgotten, really. I mean, it's just a blip, but really an amazingly fun and remarkable blip. So in that personal experience of life. So I've had guns pointed at me. I think, I know that what's done, I won't belabor this, but I know that what's done is to men is by men, DEA agents or agents, dudes with guns, can be demeaning and in our country, the men with guns can't touch women the way that they touch men, the way that they harm and try to break a man emotionally. So I'm not saying it's less for us. I'm saying it's different. And, I don't know that that's the case all the time, but I also know that they don't know, agents don't know what they're walking into. They don't know if they're walking into a gun. They don't know if they're walking into, they're facing their death. No excuses, just that we're trying, all of us, to learn how to be in this world together. I mean, cannabis is a huge, this is the big industry. So, you've got the pharmaceutical industry and tobacco and alcohol and all the big dudes. And I say dudes because I know there are a few women in there too, but, pulling down ownership and pushing out small business and pushing aside compassion. I mean, for us, we know that. We've seen what's happened to we're not Canada, we're not Canucks, we don't do compassion. We do pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing. So I don't know. There's too little compassion on the planet. So I guess it remains our job, right? So, and how do you put the gun of kindness, the one that blows open someone's heart? How do you put that to their heart if they haven't been a party to suffering or became hardened through their own suffering instead of more compassionate? So yes, I had a gun, at least a few, a few guns pulled on me, only by cops, which is fortunate, I guess, looking back on it.
Wow, well put. Welcome, Kirk. It's coming through Valerie's mic. We'll have to mute you when you're not talking. Yeah, that's very interesting and very well put, Valerie. It reminds me of something. Geez, and just mentioning this guy's name, I could have 100 people hate me because he's classified as, he gets put into all these different classifications. But I saw Jordan Peterson talking on Joe Rogan the other day, and he was talking about the importance of difficulty and how it unlocks things in our DNA as not necessarily suffer, but as we do things that are difficult, as we do things that are challenging, that it actually unlocks DNA in our own self and opens ourself up more to who we have the potential of being. And you just really explained that in the most beautiful way. Like, how do we blow up compassion in someone's heart? And I guess it's by maybe not reacting the way they anticipate and expect one to react in these particular situations when, putting a gun to someone's head is a very, very serious thing. and doing it over flowers and doing it to someone who's actually helping terminally ill and palliative care people, it just seems to take it to a level where you would think that the natural thing to do would be resentful and angry, and to not have that experience and to shift it to the other direction is very, very powerful, in my opinion. Welcome to Wade.
Safer
Yeah.
It only happened to me once, and Mark, it was when our friend Kyle was getting busted, and he was growing for the Compassion Club. So I went to his house on purpose, and I was the one who opened the door to the police on purpose. It was
ran into it.
I ran right into it, and the young man who had the gun, who was like, get down on the floor as soon as I opened the door, and had the gun on me very much towards my head. He was terrified. He was trembling. I remember seeing the like shaking gun thinking, oh, this is not good. And so I was like, you're okay. You're okay. We're not armed. You're okay. I'm okay. We're all okay. Like that was my response, was realizing that like he, I think, was more terrified than I was. I felt pretty strong and calm and clear. And that poor peach fuzz armed guy was like, yeah, he was not having a good day having to pull that gun out.
The whole experience was really incredible. I was there obviously from the start. I had dropped him off at his house. He had forgotten his keys. I suggested it wasn't a good idea at this time of night to try and break into his house because a neighbor was gonna think that he was breaking into the house. And he was like, you know, you're right. Let's just call a locksmith. So we called a locksmith, and the locksmith worked on the front door for half an hour while the neighbor saw the locksmith, thought we were breaking into the house, called the police. The police showed up. They wanted to see ID. They wanted to see this, that, and the other thing. They eventually wanted to gain access to the house because right up at the house, it didn't stink. But at the sidewalk to the house, it reeked. Just the way it is sometimes with smells, where you make toast in your house and it doesn't smell in your kitchen, but you walk halfway up your staircase and there's that toast smell. That's what happened with the cannabis. So they showed up. They kind of pretended to leave. I'm so hyper aware at times, especially when it comes to the police. I realize they haven't left at all. They've actually gone and parked down the block in the back lane, and they are awaiting a warrant. Yeah. So I'm talking to my friend like, listen, let's figure this out. Maybe we could throw everything into the neighbor's backyard for the time being. I'm just trying to help my friend. You know, he's also not from Canada. I don't want to see him get sent back down to the US. And what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Well, I know what I do. I fucking call Hilary Black is what I do. And Hilary literally races down to the house, goes inside, you know, calms him down.
He was trying to burn the clones fresh.
He was
in the fireplace. Poor guy.
He created exigent circumstances. What's the term, Kirk? I don't know. It's some sort of circumstance that
exigent circumstances.
Yeah.
Exigent circumstances just means emergency. Fancy lawyer word for emergency.
Or ruining
them, right?
What's that?
I say he should have juiced them.
Yeah, he should have juiced them, absolutely. So that was quite an experience, and that started a whole ball rolling for you, Hill. And that was one of those moments where you're just like, of course I'm gonna go run down there and be at the front door when they open the door. Like I'll tell you. That's a Compassion Club owner right there. You know, no joke about it.
He was growing for us, and I wanted it on the record. Right.
That's incredible, Hilary. That's incredible.
I only had the opportunity to do it once. Knock on wood, thankfully.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, you would have done it 100 more times had you had the opportunity. There's no question about that.
That is also about my privilege, and that I know that like I am a privileged white girl, and I grew up in a neighborhood where I always felt like the police work for me and that I'm protected. And so like I knew in that moment also the courage to run in there and open that door was a part of me exercising privilege.
And it's the consistent vigilance to take care of your caregivers and those that provide for you, because life is unpredictable all the time. It's a constant preparedness and getting them counsel and everything that you can to get them back on track. You know, it's part of that eternal vigilance reality that we deal with.
Absolutely. Well, it's good to have both Wade and Forrest in the house as well. There's, I guess, Wade or Forrest, you guys have been doing the good fight as well, but not necessarily that 20-year ago fight where they're putting guns to your head. But at the same time, it must feel a lot like having a gun put to your head.
Yeah, I've told Val this several times. I'm grateful for the path that was paved so that we could kind of enjoy the awareness that we have now. But yeah, there's different ways to put guns to people's heads. And, I know something that we're all struggling with right now is not necessarily the immediate law enforcement. Well, that's not true. The law enforcement risk is coming kind of rapidly on us here as electives are ended in a few weeks here in California. But I've been obviously not able to attend as much because 100% of the focus has just been on preparing for and helping families emotionally prepare for a lot of these programs, and ours, especially the one that I'm obviously working with directly, ending here pretty soon. So we have these kids with terminal illness and no plan and laws that are going to end the programs that are helping them. And I talked to a lot of parents in panic mode. And
Oh, he froze up on you.
There he go.
He froze.
He'll be back. Panic mode is I can't even really imagine, this is Forrest comes from a unique place. We're all compassionate. We all want to help people. It's I know Valerie's journey started with her accident and her head injury, and it's just how can it get any more personal when it's your family member, when it's your child? It just seems so wrong on so many different levels that they just have to make that right. I mean, people are obviously, getting people out of their records and out of jail time, and that's hugely important. But I think first and foremost is, the palliative people, the terminal people, the children with this extremely low quality of life due to the sufferings of their ailments and diseases. That just kind of needs to be put right at the top of the shelf. People with palliative care increasing and increasing the quality of life for people. Go ahead, Forrest. You're back, buddy. Oh, there he is.
hey,
Now we got two Forrests.
I don't know what happened there. Figures to finally say something, and then living in the mountains is such a joy,
Now we can see the forest from the trees.
Well, that's when it cut out, but
you were just at panic mode.
yeah, sometimes what I was saying is, we're not sure if those days are coming again. I've had my son's gardens raided just a few years ago. I happened to not be on the ground, so I didn't have guns at my head. But here we are now again, looking at breaking the law or not treating our kids and the patients that we're working with. So, I go back and forth. Sometimes I feel like we've made all this progress, and obviously we have. But at the same time, we're looking at being in the very real position again of having no other option but to be outside the legal market. And with that comes law enforcement. So there's a lot of work to be done still.
Nonstop civil disobedience.
So I would say too, this is the interesting thing, how legalization in America has created less access for those who, those who really need it. What is one suffering over the other? Well, but let's just presume that the people who are the sickest and the poorest and have the least access have a greater need because they cannot access cannabis. And then the polarization between that need and the service that's provided, and the new front of service, the Monsantified Jeffrey Guy's GW pharmaceutical cannabis, and how that creates lack of service until they move in to sell it to all of America, et cetera, the world. So by denying, I think, and, my conspiratorial, well, I mean, as Bob Wilson used to say, consider yourself and a group of your closest friends a conspiracy, conspirators. And I hope so, because it's our turn to conspire against, and has been for generations, to conspire against the critical force of the corporate state and that structure. It is not to allow, it's very Jeff Bezos. His name means kisses, but that's kind of the kiss of death. It's the way that you crush your competition so that you are the sole server, that you are the sole proprietor. And as you own everything, you control it. What I see is as so phenomenally difficult and painful is the creation of the suffering that has happened in America, or in California, and in the states where cannabis is legal, where we are not allowed to serve. And that will become more and more, there are many different ways that that's being achieved, or we're being denied, but that is becoming more and more prevalent and more obvious. So unless you have a great deal of money, you can gain your licenses, pay the hundreds of thousands of dollars, $100,000 or more to remodel, create this guarded entry or access to your business, and then put in place all of those pieces to serve people a plant. Let me just say that again, a plant. Then one is not able to continue to do that, provide that service. So who are our competitors, our true competitors? The problem, in my opinion, is that we think it's each other, and it's not. If there were, a national and international group of a group, our own sort of union, CFL, CIO or something, this cannabis union, where we worked together in the greater sense of promoting the small business and with service at our core, at our center, we wouldn't be in the position that's really a tidal wave of ownership and corporate entrepreneurship. And some people will make money. Yeah, that will happen. That's certain. But however, more people will be pushed aside and go back to the coal mine kind of consciousness. That's probably dramatic, but I mean to be dramatic right now. I think that's a very huge issue. And California's had 25, 26 years to do good, and we didn't. We made a mess of it. We could have created such a remarkable force with self-governance and the highest standards. And we mucked it up through competitiveness, being competitive with one another, and trying to be the fastest draw and have the best. And that's really an aside, because the best is just such a temporal place to sit, and everyone's forgotten like, who cares? Like in 1,000 years, who cares? I mean, what can we do now? Who do we serve now? Who do you serve? It's just to look at Forrest and Caladrius to think of that, the impact. Now we have to step forward, make sure that Forrest can be the liaison that he is to service, to care, to saving lives, and be there for him, lest it be me, lest it be you. How soon? Because America's a bad dog, but it isn't only America that's the bad dog. It's the corporate state, which knows no boundaries and has no vote and never dies and never goes to jail. That's so bad dog. Anyway, yep.
Bad dog indeed. It's You know, it's too bad Kirk left. I saw him recently on I guess it was just kind of like I don't know what it was called. He was on there with Bill Blair. It was a cannabis conversation. Bill Blair being our, the main guy that was put in charge of cannabis legalization, or cannabis, how things were going to roll out in Canada for cannabis. And so this gentleman that spent his entire life enforcing cannabis laws and, has probably never in his life used cannabis, is now in charge of, the regulations to put in place to control everyone in regards to this. And, Kurt was just so like perfect in every, I'll put the link up in the comments of this Hash Church when it's done, so you guys can watch it, because he just, it's scary to see the delusions of people in regards to cannabis, and the way the news stories go out of their way. Oh, let's find this girl. She says she's addicted to cannabis, and we'll make cannabis look really scary. And then we'll bring this guy on, and he can talk about impaired cannabis drivers, because that's really scary too. And then we'll talk about edibles, because how frightening is it that children could access edibles? And each and every time, Kirk just so beautifully and so articulated just destroyed any semblance of sanity in their discussion. They just came across looking not really all together about it. And it was, it's one of the reasons I invited Kirk in today, but he has many children. He said, and I know he's very busy.
He said he's going to be back in 45 minutes. He's taking one of his kids to school.
Yes, of course.
To a school event of some kind. But in that conversation, I mean, I have had the privilege and honor of presenting with Kirk, at the Senate and here and there. And I never like going before him, because he's always like, I'm always like, you please like take it home. He's so approachable. And in that one particular conversation with Bill Blair, so he has 4 kids. I tease him sometimes that he has like 16 children, but it's actually only 4, which is quite a lot. But in that conversation with Bill, the thing that he very diplomatically, pragmatically took him to task on is one of the many things in our legalization regulations that have to be fixed, is that it's still a criminal offense for anybody to traffic to a minor. So that means that it's a criminal offense for a parent to give somebody under the age of 18 cannabis. And the consequences are quite high. Like, I can't remember exactly what the fines and how many years in jail are. Kirk can tell us when he comes back. But Kirk really talks about, in such a relatable way, about a parent's right to model responsible use. And that if a parent wants to share a glass of wine with their teenager at home and show them how to, use wine in a safe way, that's absolutely, their right to do that. And he's encouraging parents to do it, that's actually the best way for us to show our youth how to use cannabis responsibly. That was my favorite part of his conversation with Bill Blair.
Yeah, it's 14 years trafficking cannabis to someone under 18 years old. That's a maximum fine, and it's scary and it sounds insane. But keep in mind, when I was arrested with the Compassion Club in 1998, I was facing 25 years in prison. That's what the fine on the books in Canada was. It was anything over 3 kilos. Was a maximum fine of 25 years in prison, which is pretty insane when you think about that. That's on our books. Now, I doubt anyone's ever been given it, but at that point, why not just get it off the books?
Well, and the thing about the youth, the way that we've set it up with youth, because our legalization is kind of like, it's like we've legalized cannabis with a prohibitionist mentality, right? Like the way that we had to feed legalization to the prohibitionists in power was, this is how we're going to reduce the harms of cannabis, rather than, we're really sorry that we lied to you for 100 years. And this is actually based in like racism and capitalism. But so the whole protect the youth piece, if you're a 19-year-old and you pass a joint to an 18-year-old, that whole body of criminal law applies to you in terms of that offense. And the scary thing about those kinds of regulations is that we can say, like they're probably, and again, let's jump back to this when Kirk is back. This is kind of like so much his wheelhouse, but we can assume, based on how prohibition has been applied, that those laws will be exercised in a disproportionate way. If you are poor or if you do not have white skin, you're going to be more likely to receive those kinds of charges than if you have money, are white, and are sharing a joint with your kid in your nice house.
So I think this is where we overlap. I mean, they're not exactly the same laws. We can serve children. Primarily, I believe here, because so many of our initial patients, the people that we served, were youth, underage, and parents were stepping in. Many of them lost their children. CPS took them. This has been a fear, I know, of a Forrest. I mean, how can you be in the position? There's nothing more important for a parent than to protect his or her child. It's just profound importance. So and again, one does what you have to do. Go ahead. I'd rather not speak for you, but I wanted to dovetail on something that I think we both face and know that we have to deal with here. This is again where it becomes grassroots work, and you go back into the trenches of that. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to jump in. I mean, we, last year I did a panel at the Emerald Cup about cannabis.
Man, that is like I'm like, no.
Or people, there's not a lot of people who can really advocate for the children on the other side that aren't immediately discredited, right? So they are absolutely valid voices, but the prohibitionist side is always saying, well, they have an agenda, right? They have this business, they have that, so they discount them. One of the privileges of my situation is I've always been in this position of just being a parent, right? I don't own any other business. The charity that we have doesn't make any money. There's no financial gain there. So I was always able to be used in that position. And, Hilary's absolutely right. We always see this, this underappreciation for the risk of pharmaceutical medication. They exaggerate how well those things work, and then they exaggerate the harms of cannabis. So they're constantly talking about emergency room visits and the uptick in emergency room visits now that edibles are allowed, but they never really go past that, right? They don't ever say, once they're in the emergency room, they just kind of give them some fluids and tell them to hang out for a little bit and they're going to be fine, right? There's no demonstrated harm there. And when they talk about pharmaceutical medication and risk in children, they never talk about absolutely how dangerous the pharmaceutical meds that are being given to kids are, especially in comparison with cannabinoid therapy. So they don't talk about what it's like to give phenobarbital to a 11-month-old child. They don't talk about the intestinal damage that is caused by that, the addiction rates in children. They don't talk about any of the things that happen every day with these medications that are not working. They're also not being beneficial for them. So it's just, I think, again, where I've always been is it's just education. And when you have kind of compile some of the statistics and numbers for what we're doing to treat suffering in adults and children versus, the efficacy rates of medicine versus their side effects, you really can't ethically ever say that cannabis should never not be the first option. If the thought behind medicine is first do no harm, and that's the motto our doctors are going to take, then the highest chance of efficacy with least chance of negative side effects, literally none in most cases, is going to be, cannabinoid therapies of some type. And it is, everything on the news is, every cannabis sort of story that's done is always like with a wink, wink, nod, nod. Oh, it's 420 and everyone's coming out to party. And, it's to this day, despite my efforts and a lot of others, cannabis is still reported as kind of a joke. And it's just a party tool when it's so much more than that. And the lack of reporting on how serious of a topic some of the aspects of cannabis are the reason we can be banning, medical access for hundreds of thousands of patients here in California, one of the largest economies in the world, here in just a few weeks, and no one's talking about it. There's not a news story. There's not an uproar. There's nothing. While people like, I'm sure, Valerie and myself, I get 10 to 15 phone calls a day from families crying, panicking, children that we've pulled out of hospice because nothing was working, wondering what they're going to do as these charities are shut down. And it's not even an issue. It's just cannabis is legal. Everything's great. 420's here, everybody, and let's high five and enjoy it. And it really is a shame.
Well, here's a thought on that, Forrest. How about when our own community is more obsessed with getting awards for their own works and spend countless amounts of money on these events for booths and for tickets and to win a prize and to be basically like patting themselves on the back and then putting that in all of their Instagrams and their Facebook posts and telling everyone how much they won, when there's groups like yours that are the front line of this. Because here's the thing, they'll put the gun to a lot of people's heads, but I've yet to see them do it to the children. The children, I said a few years back, it's like the last leg that prohibition has to stand on. They've kind of gone around you, but you guys can never forget that you guys have a power that no one else in the community has. And I think it's why I've always been sort of attracted to what you're doing and to what Hilary was doing and Valerie and Etienne, and just always kind of wanting to support that in any way, shape, or form. I told you just the other day, Forrest, that what you guys do is my favorite part of the cannabis community. It's the soul of the cannabis community. And I just think that when there's a big event like the Emerald Cup coming up, I think every single one of those companies and more should be donating to groups like yours.
Well, what's happened with legalization is it's created an illusion of service, and that's the same problem. There, you can get what you need, or you can get what you want, and in fact, that is not true. Some people can get what they need, and some people can get what they want. And there has been a dismissiveness from many of the dispensaries of medical. Well, we don't really deal with medical anymore. Oh, medical is another type of service. Go somewhere else. Maybe they don't say that's not good for business to say don't go somewhere else. But that illusion of service has created that. I mean, one of the ways to get parents who've never tried cannabis or who are concerned, or even if they have tried cannabis, are concerned about getting their kids stoned, is to ask them, and probably Forrest has done this too, is just to say, look, take 1/2 of one dose of the medication that you give your child every day. Just 1/2 of one dose. And then tell me how you feel. And then it changes the perspective. But that still doesn't answer the question and the difficulties that we face today in serving those in the greatest need. Nearly 250,000 Californians became medically bankrupt. 3 people per household. That's 750,000 people. When you look at those numbers and you see the impact of our completely out of balance system in America, where the most importance lay in the power that the biggest corporations have. And I mean, every country in the quote unquote free-ish world faces those kinds of impacts, and that type of oversight of business. It does not allow for the way that lives profit or benefit from access. So, I mean, I always, I feel like I've got the market cornered because I serve the poor. I'm not the only one who does it, but I don't have a lot of competition to serve the poor. So that's what we're doing with our business. We've been closed for almost a year, at least. We can help it as an individual, but you cannot help as a business unless you have met all these hoops. And we have not had a site for almost a year. I signed the lease a few days ago on a new site, but what we're doing, the dispensary is only a small part of it. The rest is a community center in which we're drawing people with knowledge, with information. There's an MD and ND, Ayurvedic doctor, an herbalist, people coming in who will be coming in and having a part-time residence there so that they can expand their mission to serve. Because we know that one thing does not heal, right? It's many things that heal. And it's our opportunity to provide as much access to the different combinations of phytotherapies. Like I've moved away from using the word medical cannabis to phytotherapeutic applications or phytotherapies, because it is profoundly important that we look at the bigger picture. If for at least WHAM to survive, if I can't compete with dispensaries, because it's not selling cannabis that keeps us in a marketplace. It's the service that keeps us in a marketplace. So now I look to the future being, my hope is that over time we turn WHAM into a worker-owned cooperative. Because why? Well, because people, when you have ownership, you produce the greatest quality, the best quality, the highest integrity. It's your own business, and you can do what, and a group of many, like we used to be the group of many, that we could stand up to the power. And now in business, one has to define oneself in a different way to survive as a small business. And you just look every day at Amazon and what's happening. And I bang and bash Amazon because I hate his business practices, Jeff Bezos's business practices. I think they're terrible. But in any case, to expand by bringing in the greatest minds and the greatest people, the greatest comrades in service, one has the opportunity to create a business that truly serves wellness and all kinds. If you're well, stay well. If you're sick, get well. If you're dying, die well. So that we are at the bedsides and in the gym and in the thought processes of people as we attempt to heal ourselves and, like kind of dorky, but become masters, right? That's what everybody's trying to achieve, the same thing, whether we know it or not, whether you want to make $1 billion or you want to have a happy dinner with your family. There's still a sense deep within that we are trying to touch and achieve. So it's important, I think, as a small business person, to give it back to the people in a way that has the greatest potential, and maybe we'll still be in business in 100 years. Who knows, right? So, and I look to Forrest for some of that camaraderie, because I see Forrest as in the same basket as myself, and many others too. There are many people who I can learn from and have much to bring. So
we've been in a really unique situation with just working with pediatrics, and that's why I think everything comes down to education and educating the cannabis community. And Marcus, you're exactly right. Thank you. That I've gotten a lot of flack over the years because I really felt like it was important to address the cannabis community as much as it was to address the prohibitionist community, because both were doing things that intentionally or unintentionally were putting kids and patients at risk. And we don't have to get into that too much, but it has to do with the exploitation of the word medicine, how it's been loosely applied to anything that has to do with cannabis, and kind of devalued to the point where that medicinal cannabis is looked at in a lot of communities as a big joke, right? It's a wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah, you got a backache. Let's get medicated. And just, trying to get them to use terms appropriately. And that gets into a big debate of what is medicine and how medicinal use is used. But it's not about that. It's not about saying one use is and isn't medical. It's just about making sure we're giving the topic the respect that it deserves, so that we're not inadvertently devaluing some of its applications to the point where the greater community doesn't think that it's real anymore. And working with pediatrics, we see that Valerie made a very good point that there is this. We're always fighting this illusion that everything's fine now. Cannabis is legalized in a lot of the United States, so everything's fine now. Well, now there's dispensaries and medical dispensaries, so medical patients are taken care of. But what we see maybe more than other communities in pediatrics is really how far away we are from being able to deal with serious catastrophic neurological conditions. And I'll give a couple examples. We're serving ongoing, like 150 to 200 families. We do consultation and periodic help for over 1,000 families. I would say 1% of those families could find and be okay with finding a CBD or tincture type product in dispensaries. The rest of them, what they take is not available for a couple reasons. One, there's dosage concentration limits. And this is a problem in Canada as well, because I get calls from families there. The problem is all of the community, parents and cannabis community alike, is for the most part not up to date. So they don't even know that there's a problem. Asking. So we had the Epidiolex trials that were released last year. Again, that's another problem where people say, well, Epidiolex is out. It's a CBD. It's going to be available by prescription. Kids are fine now. And people are fine with epilepsy, which is not the case. A lot of people, the majority of them, don't respond to purified CBD. But with those studies, therapeutic dosing happens in a lot of anywhere to 15 milligrams per kilogram. So we have 9-year-old, 10-year-old kids, weighing 100 pounds, coming to us with anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25 milligrams per pound dosage recommendations, sometimes from their doctors. So when you get those sort of recommendations and they titrate up to them, they find efficacy there. You can't get that sort of dosage in any dispensary in California, and I would argue probably in the United States, because of dosing restrictions, right? If you're needing a 1,500 to 2,000 milligram per day dose, those things aren't readily available because of the way we've structured everything. So there's this constant pushback against, everybody's taken care of and everything's fine now. Because it's just not the case. And that's if you're lucky enough to respond to CBD. And my son doesn't. I would say 98% of the kids that we work with don't respond to just CBD. Again, there's a difference between like 30% efficacy and where we want to get into the 80 and 90 percentile efficacy, right? So if you see some benefit, that doesn't mean that that's the right medicine for you. It is beneficial, but there are greater sets of relief out there with work. And as you get kids on specialized ratios, whether it's a 2-to-1 or a 10-to-1 and different balances, but then you get into needing specific terpene profiles as well as other aspects, right? Some of the kids that we work with respond to specific acidic to non-acidic cannabinoid ratios, right? We're learning that there's this synergistic effect, and we have all these different ways that we can change how they interact with that one unique brain. And right now on the shelves, we have CBD, maybe a 1-to-1 oil at such a low concentration that it's not really beneficial for therapeutic use. So we're really far away from being anywhere near being able to serve the community that I'm working with. There's really a lack of understanding there. And I think that as we can help people recognize where the holes are and why, then we can start to address those things. But right now, it's really hard to get any traction in that. Everyone's struggling to survive themselves, or they're excited about other aspects of cannabis. This one is, it's not a lot of glory in it. There's not a lot of money in it, and it's very hard to get some traction. But
you know what, Forrest, in my opinion, that's why groups like, my company and the company of many other people need to just sort of buckle down and kick down and support these places, because like I said, it's the front lines. It's the group of people that will actually get through the prohibitionists. Hilary said it earlier, how people have just been so afraid of THC, and now these regulations of having concentrates being limited and having edibles being limited. It's just, to me, it's as simple can be. We need exactly the models that yourself and Valerie and Etienne and Hilary have done for years. But on the flip side of it, I still see it's not I'm not on the fence, or I guess I am on the fence. I'm not on either side of the fence, because here we have this huge division between licensed producers and dispensary owners. And the dispensary owners are like, oh, the licensed producers are, they're taking all our business. They're coming in. We're not getting licensed. It's this whole, it almost probably would be what the mom and pop dealers probably felt when people started opening dispensaries, because trust me, like one dispensary shut down 200 or 300 mom and pop dealers like that. Overnight, people that were helping pay their rent and putting gas in their cars were cut out of that money, because now people could go to these dispensaries, and that's amazing. But there's always sort of this negative aspect of it. I would love to see everyone be able to play on an equal playing field. And I'm not as opposed to a giant company like Canopy when I know they've got someone like Hilary in their ear, that they've got DNA, that they've got Kirk. And more importantly, what they recently did, which I'll let Hilary speak on, because when you're a compassion club, when Hilary opened the compassion club and would never take a penny of profit and lived like a pauper and came from West Vancouver, which is like a nice neighborhood, and lived in East Vancouver, which is like a harder neighborhood to move to when you've been living your whole life in West Vancouver, and lived on this level and refused to take profits. And when the club started selling a lot, the profits went back into healers and people that could talk to the different people who had different ailments or mental health issues, or they could get massages, or they could get all these different aspects of healing for free based on the small profit that was created in them buying the medicine in the first place, which is amazing. That should never go away. You're touching this group of people. On the flip side of that, you have a group like Canopy just recently kicking down $2.5 million for this opioid addiction and potential, findings of cannabis being able to be helpful in that. Do you want to speak on that a little bit, Hilary?
Well, yeah, I mean, this kind of roots back to what Val was just talking about in terms of the project that she is initiating or reinitiating again. And some of my inspiration from Val really encouraged me 2 decades ago to build the wellness center at the Compassion Club. So that wellness center, I mean, the Compassion Club in Vancouver was like the first sort of out of the closet pot dealer in the country. And the wellness center is the thing that was the spoonful of sugar that helped the medicine go down, I like to say. And that wellness center gave us integrity with the police and the medical organizations and the city. And even like last year, I still like rep that Compassion Club when I go to like speak to the Senate. We had the task force come through that was doing all the recommendations about what legalization should look like. So it's still doing sort of front lines political work, converting people to understanding like that cannabis is not just, like a party drug or something that has the risks that need to be managed. But you're sort of on a tear today, Mark, about, kicking down and donations. And I mean, my hope is that this industry will become the most conscious, the most generous, the most socially responsible industry in the world. And I think that even if we're not doing it for altruistic reasons, even if it's driven by economic incentive in terms of dissolving prohibition around the world, the thing that dissolves the stigma that props up prohibition is generosity, social responsibility, doing meaningful work inside communities and sharing the profits. And so I choose to work in the heart of the country and potentially world's biggest cannabis company. In some ways, it is the corporate machine. It's a part of the corporate machinery that Val was talking about. And for me, I know that I have a really big responsibility to have a seat at the table, to use my power that I do have inside that company to drive really good work. So I wish that Kirk was here for this part. He would love to chime in. I'm sure he'll be back soon. But so for me, in Canada, we have this crazy opioid overdose epidemic, and it's not just about people being addicted to their pharmaceuticals, but the street opioids we have, the drug supply is poisoned. So it's fentanyl that's in the drug supply. the people are like being killed in British Columbia faster. I think we're losing 4 people a day, 5 people a day now. And it's not just the like, it's not the community of people that you expect it to be that is the impoverished, mental health, sort of more visible on the streets. I mean, the fentanyl epidemic is touching people in all walks of life. And one of those people that it touched last year was my best friend's daughter. So her name is Gemma, and she died just over a year ago. So I took some time off from work, because that's what you do when your best friend's daughter died. Hang on, I'm going to tell this story without crying. So when I went back to work, I was gone for about 2 months. When I went back to work, my team at Canopy said, well, what do you want to do? Like, let's do something. And so I phoned up some amazing friends and colleagues of mine at the BC Centre of Substance Use, which is like a world's leading organization around research around substance use disorders. And they helped me to put together a project because I wanted to do something that was going to have ongoing impact. And so we gifted $2.5 million to the University of British Columbia. And the government in BC, the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction, put in another $500,000. So pretty cool to have government money, weed money, university coming together, because this crisis really needs some like collaborative, innovative leadership, and money. Seriously needs money. We just don't seem to care enough about people who are using drugs dying. And so what we did is we created an endowment. So that endowment is like a money generating machine. It doesn't just get spent. It basically will support a professor. And we created the Canopy Growth Professorship of Cannabis Science. And this incredible man, MJ Malloy, has now been announced as that professor. And his research, the body of clinical evidence that is being supported, is about the role of cannabis in the opioid overdose epidemic. So the clinical trials are not about opioid sparing for pain patients, how you taper a pain patient off of their opioids onto cannabis. This is about people who are addicted to fentanyl and addicted to heroin. And some of the trials will be about substitution, and some of them will be about helping adherence to other treatment programs, because people who are addicted to fentanyl have about like a 20-something% success rate of staying on their treatment programs. So my hope is that clinical evidence, it's not a quick fix. It's not like the people who are in the downtown east side, which is the hardcore community, the hardcore neighborhood where this epidemic is happening, who are doing cannabis substitution projects. This is about a systemic solution, because my hope is that body of clinical evidence will help healthcare professionals around the world to know that cannabis is one of the tools that they have when they're dealing with somebody who has any kind of a substance use disorder, be it alcohol or opioids or benzos or fentanyl or crack cocaine or anything. And so we actually just announced MJ just a week ago, and I am profoundly proud of my team at Canopy for ponying up that kind of dough. And as we build out our global social responsibility strategy, I hope and I believe that we'll continue to lead with these kinds of initiatives, because I want every cannabis company in the world, whether you make hemp bomb lipsticks in your kitchen or you're an epic like multi-million-dollar international huge company, for us to really be the most generous, most amazing industry in the world, because it is true works of compassion like Val's work and Forrest's work and my Compassion Club's work that is breaking down prohibition around the world. And we all need to be like giving back in a really significant way. And that's my rant.
That was beautiful, Hilary. And you know what? We need to realize that this division, even within our own community, when Hilary announced this, there were literally person after person after person, including well-known people in the industry, attacking her for naming it Canopy Growth like, oh, you had to put your name in it. It's like, dude, they donated $2.5 million and they're setting up this whole amazing thing, and you're gonna bash on them for like putting their name in it. Like, it just seems so petty. Like there's just this crazy division in Canada, especially between the sort of homegrown dispensary model and the LP. You know, and a lot of the LPs, sure, there are LPs that have brutal people working for them, where they're like ex-sheriffs or ex-police, and I get you know, people not having a good feeling about that. But there are LPs that were like just black market growers that were like, I'm going to start an LP because I just want to operate in a legal mechanism. And for me, I'm not for LPs at the expense of dispensaries and home grows. I am for all access across the board in any way that that looks like for you, because while some people are very happy to touch the members of their community, there are other people that need to touch members of as many communities as they can. They want to touch hundreds of thousands. They want to touch millions, and you can't really shit on them for that as long as their model doesn't drastically affect that small model of, you know, grassroots. Like grassroots can never go away, but at the same time, that certainly doesn't stop the mighty oak tree from growing up nice and tall, does it?
You know, I don't know if there's a way to get around the cannabis industry kind of being the savior for the suffering and sick and dying. And I don't know why it would want to not take advantage of that. You know, a lot of the cannabis community is for years, and Valerie spoke about this a little bit, has been really outspoken against the pharmaceutical industry for a very justifiable reason. They very clearly articulated how much harm it was doing, how the monopolies damaged our community, how dangerous drugs were damaging, how profits were put ahead of patients' lives. And that's been something that's been talked about openly for decades. But now there's this situation where, as not only the legitimacy of cannabis and cannabinoid therapies as a medicine is more widely accepted, but we're seeing that it's even more powerful than we even knew it was 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. We have that same option. Now a medical cure for some of the most horrific diseases imaginable is in our hands, and immediately it's kind of like poof, we just see dollar signs, right? That's human nature. The pharmaceutical industry isn't a separate beast. It's just controlled by humans. And I think if we can get into the culture, this opportunity of one, yes, if you're a good business person and responsible, there's financial riches to be had out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. I would like a little bit of that myself at some point. But at the same time, there's, when you're dealing with medicine, and we're gonna call this medicine, and it is medicine, then there's some responsibility and opportunity that comes with it. And one of the examples I gave earlier was the price problems with CBD, where there's clinically shown therapeutic efficacy versus what it's being what the cost is to get it in a dispensary if you can find it in concentration. So let me go back to that real quick just to highlight that. If we have someone who's taking 1,500 milligrams a day or 2,500 milligrams a day of CBD at our local dispensary, that equals about 8 bottles of the only whole plant CBD oil that they have. And those are about $80 a piece, right? So you're talking about $640 or so a day, if my math is correct. That's if you can get them to drink 8 bottles a day, which you can't. And this goes back to some of the problems with the understanding of if there is access or not. But those doses are never going to be sustainable. I mean, you have a business that has a cost, and people have to survive. You can't just work for free. We understand that. And you have a reality that is requiring something that isn't. So how do we solve that? Right. And I think that really where Hilary hit it on the head is that, if we come together and structure the system in a way that subsidizes the needs for some of the most critically ill in our communities, we have an opportunity. It doesn't have to be altruistic, but to make a business model that gains public support, sways public support, brings in prohibitionists because you can see the good that they're doing by working into that system, charity and benefit for people in their communities. And that can be done if our legislators don't tax cannabis owners to death, right? If everyone's not trying to squeeze every penny from our legislators to all the distribution everywhere, if everyone's trying to squeeze every penny along the supply chain, well, then there's going to be nothing left for those in need. But if we subsidize it appropriately so that cultivators can affordably have 1% or 5% of their cultivation go to charitable causes, and they're not just dying because they can't afford the taxes to even have a single plant that isn't going back into the regulated market, then we can start to produce cannabis and develop organizations that harness this market to meet those people's needs. And then, the argument a lot of people have is, well, then how everyone, if we're not going to be paying for it, then everyone's going to say they're medical, right? That's another damage that sort of the medical system has done here in California, at least the last 20 years. If we give them anything for free, then everyone's going to have a backache again, and everyone's going to be medical. But we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. It seems like we're looking for this whole new structural system with cannabis, but we have a structural system for medication that will really address a lot of the issues we have. Marcus, you brought up edibles and dosing limits, right? We're setting those dosing limits and edibles at essentially over-the-counter strength. We haven't really determined and realized yet that cannabis has potentially over-the-counter regulations where any mom and dad and grandpa, anyone who walks in wants to try a gummy bear, we have safety over-the-counter regulations. But we haven't set any of what we call the prescription regulations yet. People who need higher dosage limits, people who need and justifiably need with doctors' support products that right now they're saying are too dangerous to be on the market. If we could start to address the over-the-counter versus prescription need of critically ill patients, make responsible tax incentives and credits for the industry, we can make a pathway where we could be as successful as we want and the heroes in our community at the same time. We can show that we value death, that we value suffering. We pay lip service to seniors, and we pay lip service to dying kids. But when it comes down to it, they're completely forgotten when there's a dollar to be made. If we set up these structures, we can help all three of those communities that I just named and others that I haven't, while simultaneously being successful. And that just it's a big problem. So it takes hitting it on all levels, which I've kind of burned myself out on the last few years trying to do at the legislative, local, and in our patient groups and educating through our patient groups. But I believe it can be done. And I think that there's folks in this room here who have been fighting the good fight and can help us do it.
I'd like to pipe up for a second. I, in my life, was very inspired back in the 90s when Valerie Corral got in a lot of trouble with the DEA for her work. And part of what was so affecting to me personally was witnessing the people she was helping. And it sounds like Hilary has been doing the same thing in Vancouver, and I know Forrest is doing that work. And I think an important part of this is us being willing to step forward, to make ourselves public, not as perhaps as business people, but as people who have sufficient compassion for the struggle that some humans are dealing with, and recognition of the fact that this plant can help those people. When the plant is grown and prepared and formulated in a way that is appropriate for the needs of the end user, you can see miraculous things happen. Everyone here has seen that happen in their own lives. And what is important about Hash Church and the work that each of us as individuals have been doing is by identifying people who have desperate need and seeing benefit and sharing that information with the public, be they prohibitionists, be they other cannabis workers, be they medical professionals, be they media people. It's really, I think, an important part of our work right now in our activism And again, Valerie, back in the 90s, you changed my life. You continue to inspire me. And I'm really glad to know of Hilary and her work. I really feel like we're at a point where we have to educate about the real need that exists and the fact that pharmaceuticals can do so much harm. And this plant, particularly when it is properly formulated from plant material that's clean and free of contaminants, can do amazing things for people. And I'm going to stop right there. Thank you, Marcus, for doing this. I'm going to just watch some more.
Well, thanks for sharing, Wade. We always appreciate your perspective. It always sounds like it was well thought out. And welcome, Dragonfly, Earth Medicine.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Super important conversation. We really appreciate all of you all that are fighting the good fight. I know that I can say that, you know, Dragonfly Earth Medicine and what we do really represents a lot of the growers out there. And I feel like, you know, we have a real problem in legislation, like what with everybody is saying. And right now the legislation is basically cutting off the arms and the legs and the mobility of growers right now in all areas that have recreational. And then they're asking us to give more and do more. And we know now that Washington has been rec for I don't know how many years now, but 58% of the growers are no longer in the business. There's ghost towns right now in California that used to be totally thriving. Areas where businesses were doing really well. Now you go into those small little towns and they're totally ghost towns because of the regulations. So I feel like, you know, we're getting hit on all sides. If we're talking about access is becoming less and less in the hands of the small growers and of the people who are growing responsibly, and more in the hands of the corporate model. And that's a legislative issue right now.
And we also look to safe access for the earth in providing the medicine. So it's a little bit of an offshoot from what we're talking about at the moment, but small farms have the ability to save the earth, and large agriculture is hard on the earth. And if we're in a place where we're healing each other, it makes a lot of sense for us to see how we can heal the earth at the same time, because it's another being which is taking a hit and is sick on a lot of levels. So we have a tremendous amount of, it's really beautiful to see everyone in this room. It's really awesome to hear from you, Valerie, and I hope to see you at the Emerald Cup this year along with everyone else. But you know, we are all in different places within this industry, and it's really special that we do get to come together to share our journey and our vision. And we'll just assure you that, you know, our dedication to provide the safe medicine and work with farms to stay in business will continue from us. And we all can only do so much. So we really are incredibly thankful to you all, Hilary and Etienne and Forrest and everyone here, Marcus, that you are all doing what you're doing in your area. And really by us coming together, we really are supporting each other. And that's what's really important.
And we're an incredibly resilient community. We are an unbelievable, resilient community. We have come from the black market. We have gone against all odds to sit here in front of the screen to talk to so many other people who are in the same position as us. And also this plant is incredibly resilient. She will make herself known no matter what. So how is it that we're going to handle her? How are we going to give her the respect that she deserves to be able to step into the market? Because I truly believe that we haven't given her that respect. Not the small growers, not the people that are here on this show, you know, today, but as far as like the legislative end of it, you know, the respect hasn't been given. Money has been first. And I think that we have this opportunity to go hand in hand with the plant so that we can move forward in a way that's respectful for the earth, for the farmers, for the corporations, and definitely for the patients.
And I guess one more thing is, it looks like we are going to get pinched for a little while longer. You know, it's going to be sort of us sort of suffering together on one level. But as long as like we show each other the love that we're talking about here, it's gonna be the only inspiration that we have to get through this. So I just want to continue to be that voice of reason and really just give each other, empower each other on our mission, because it's going to take, like, just like with growing, it takes a lot of different, you know, modalities to make it healthy. It's going to take a lot of modalities to make this legalization work. And it's really tough. You know, we're working on it in Canada. And, you know, we're also in Oregon right now and on our way to California. So we're very connected to the process of providing this medicine. So, yeah, so we want to do all we can with our network of farms to support WHAM, to support Valerie, to support Wade, even though, you know, you're in an area where you can only have one plant. That's really sad. I hope that changes. Yeah, we're please be in touch with us. We're in touch with you all mostly anyway, but we just really want to know how you all could use our network to help you out, you know, and other people in other networks.
And right now, Dragonfly Earth Medicine Pure Certification is over 80 farms deep. And we are doing the good work. We are doing what it takes to make a difference on this planet and treat the plant with intention and respect.
We're trading seeds and swapping and trading stories of successes and failures and becoming better as a team. So we're going to say we're doing the mycelial work at the moment.
You know, I think just knowing that as a lot of our groups are in the legal market now, simultaneously, patients and terminally ill children and adults are being forced into the black market. You know, it's just important for us to keep that conversation going. And we are all in different areas, but in most of the states in the United States, it's relatively similar. But here in California, as we get more and more legalized, and this happened in Washington, it happened in Oregon, the people who actually have critical care need are being forced further and further into the black market because we're just not regulating responsibly. And I think the more that people with a voice can always put that little asterisk on it, it keeps it in the public awareness. And right now it's not, you know, and it really is a shame that there's all this topic about conversation, but here in the 7th largest that's a shutdown and other collections, and no one's talking about it. So everybody out there that can help, you know, just keep that awareness would be wonderful.
Also, you know, to add to what you're saying, Forrest, more and more patients are entering into the black market to try to fulfill their needs. Well, that's what's happening to a lot of growers, to be able to fulfill the patient's needs. So we're really in the same position. We've had hundreds of patients and children that we've been working with. And just like what you all were saying earlier on the show, is that we're getting people writing us every day. And we have a tremendous responsibility to continue taking care of our patients. And where is the responsibility now? So you weigh it out. It's like you've got a responsibility for trying to be legal and play the system in the right way, but we have a tremendous responsibility to continue to provide medicine to our patients. Yeah, it's a real conundrum.
I know it's happening in Canada because I get calls and emails from families there all the time. And, you know, they say, you know, I think some of the most we get are the children with EB, the skin condition that I've really worked hard to help families with over the last few years. And they say, hey, we can't, can you teach us how to make the cream? And I say, absolutely. Go see what is available and let's see if we can find what we need. And you can't, you know, and they find out really quickly that what is needed for that level of care versus what is available is just not there. And it's that disconnect that I'm hoping to help close the gap on, you know, and really help people understand that I almost don't like the term legalization. You know, I don't know if we have legalization. We have very limited commercial allowance. You know, there's the majority of interaction with this plan is absolutely illegal. And, you know, that might be nitpicking, but it just seems like we're constantly fighting that, oh, everything's fine now, right? It's the general public, as soon as they see any progress, they go, okay, we don't have to worry about all those folks anymore because it's good now. And I just, you know, I don't know how to fight that other than saying, well, we don't necessarily have what we need, and we don't really have legalization. We have some very limited commercial allowance, and because it's so limited, things that have been legal here in California for 25 years are now completely illegal. And it's actually harder now than it was a decade ago for us to treat the people who these laws were absolutely intended for in the very beginning. California was the first in the United States to have medical cannabis when Dennis Perone put this out for dying AIDS patients and others. And these are the people who no longer have access to what they need. And, you know, we are either going to ignore it and look back on it and regret it, or we're going to, you know, address it and stand up and speak about it. And I'll be at the Emerald Cup this year. I'm speaking on Saturday, and I'm not doing a booth this year, so I'm excited to get to actually walk around and spend time in the teepee. So
you can put your information at our teepee, because we're making spaces for you and for other Pure Farms, because we know that the Emerald Cup is different this year.
Yeah,
and we have a big space, so we're going to utilize it. So yeah, we're going to make space for you for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to bring the conversation from the micro to the macro. So as individuals and as people who suffer, that is our story, and the work that we do is the way that we reach human beings, the way that we touch one another's heart. And that's that kind of the intimate connection that we have from human to human. And the story of suffering always, not always, but primarily ignites an emotional response from others. And we look to that because that's how we connect, eye to eye, impassioned. But however, I want to pull it back to the macro, because where I think that it is profoundly important to push back against the corporate state. Now, let me make a distinction here. WHAM's a corporation. So I'm not saying that every corporation is the doomsayer for smaller business. I'm not saying that. However, I do believe that how do you, if we are ever to be able to turn this monster, this corporate monster, on its head, to flip it so that there is space for compassionate access, not just to cannabis, but compassionate access to life for human beings, for all living creatures, for every sentient being, for the planet itself as a sentient being, then it's our job, it's my job at least, to speak against the profound and innate evil that is part of the corporate state of lack of consciousness. It is what we are looking at and what we are being affected by is so profoundly huge that when we see only from our own perspective, which is really all we can do, but when we see only from that perspective, we are trying to find our place in a structure that always minimizes who we are as individuals, as small business people, as the people who are suffering. The response now, I commend and I agree that we need to inspire corporations, large corporations, big business, to do good, right? We want them to do good. However, and anytime that we can do that, that is a profoundly important thing. But there are several things that are at cost here and are at stake. And to begin, one is that we're taking all these sacred medicines. Well, all plants are sacred, it's nature, but poison oak is sacred, all of it. But we're taking this, we're removing it from its place in nature, and the shaman, the knowers, the keepers of wisdom, we're taking them, removing them, and we're putting these plants into the laboratory. And what happens when we do that? What occurs when we do that? We're removing the connection to the sentient part of plants, because for instance, the way we look at animals. Well, animals aren't smart because they don't speak English, or they don't speak Spanish, or they don't speak an oral language that we understand. So we try to train them to speak the language that we speak without understanding that they have their own communication, their own systems. So it's what we do as human beings, and our infinite wisdom and our lack of our inability to connect deeply. That's why we do psychedelics, and why we take this plant to that space, let it take us, to that space of deep, to incite our wisdom, to inspire us to listen deeply. So I think it is time to say no to the corporate state, to say no, thank you. We can do this, and we will do it so much better than you. Ram Dass used to sit before his stroke. He sat on many boards. He sat on a Turner board, TMT, that board, to keep the heart in the boardroom, to bring it in once in a while. As you're talking about billions of dollars, where's the heart in where's that language? Who speaks it? How do we say it? How do we remind one another? I think that it is to not, I don't condemn anybody for doing it, and I know that it has to be done to take part at that table in that boardroom. Last place I would ever want to be. No, last place is in a political position. So second to the last place I would ever want to be. I think that it is of profound importance to say no, and to take on our role. California, I take feel very personal about this. California massively blew it. We had such a great opportunity to do good, and we chose to do money. Okay, are they separate? Are they exclusive from one another? They don't have to be, but they have been. And I'm not saying us in this conversation. This conversation is so remarkable, and I'm so grateful to be sitting at the table with all of you, and recognize that nothing is done alone. That I never did anything alone. I've always done it in the company of greatness, and my most profound teachers are the people who have faced death and done what I hope to do a good job at. Yet here we sit, and I'm just going to go on and sound like I'm bashing corporations, and in many ways I am saying you have done a bad job. Yes, Amazon can get something to my door, and I can pick on Amazon every day. I try to. It's one of my mantras, that. And so because I love you, Donald Trump, because he brings up emotions in me that I really don't want to feel. I don't want to have invading my life. Those things that we look at in our lives, and the way that we can change what is profoundly the wrong path we talk about saving the planet, but we really mean save the people. My ex-husband Mike used to say that. We really mean save us. Give us a place in it. Give us what we want so that we can thrive. And unless we thrive together and recognize that we cannot thrive individually, that's not thriving, then I think that we are on a course to eliminate our ability to help, other than just helping someone cross the street. We must really find the ways to infiltrate and flip this thought, this idea that the best way to thrive is to make the most that you can make. I'm not saying that that's happening in our group, but I think that it is profoundly important that we stand up to it and say no. And you're doing it completely wrong, and you're doing it all wrong. And that may leave us vulnerable again, right, Forrest? It leaves us vulnerable again because we're not protected. We're not protected. And that's why we've done the same work for 25 years. We've always helped people. For once a week, we have a community meeting, all of our members come, blah, 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 all those things that you do to build community, which is a safe place to be. The more of us there are, the greater number, the more power that we have. But I would say that we already have that power, that we are already great in numbers, and that we already feel very much the same way, if not exactly the same, but our intention is there to create the world that we can thrive in, where the world itself as a single body and thrives, because all of us are in complement with that consciousness and awareness, and because we infiltrate and influence those who are not yet. You know, everybody dies, and I watch people. I've been at over 200 deathbeds. You die the way you live. It's a great opportunity to pull your shit together. But if we haven't been working hard to achieve that, or working to achieve that, it can become a great puzzle. Now, I'm not saying I do a great job. I don't know that I probably do a terrible job if that happens today. But this ultimate goal is to not watch our work die, because it is controlled by those who are motivated strictly by profit. Okay, I'm done.
Well, shout out to Terence McKenna. You did mention psychedelics. It can never be mentioned. You can't mention psychedelics without me mentioning Terence McKenna. Huge inspiration in my life, listening to him and Rupert Sheldrake and Ralph Abraham talk at the Esalen Institute talks. Google them if you haven't heard of them. #Church Watchers. Welcome back, Kirk. You made it.
Thanks, man. A little kid duty there.
One of the many. One of your many 16 children, as Hilary was joking about.
That's right. Sometimes it feels like it.
Well, we were missing you. There was a few good conversations that came up where we were like, oh, it would be good if Kirk was in the room to talk about this right now.
I wouldn't mind chiming in on this issue of corporations, because it's an interesting one to me. And I guess I'll put this out there. A corporation is nothing more than a group of people that have come together to achieve a common purpose that's given a legal structure within, most countries in the world. And, to focus on North America, it's given a certain legal structure so that people can come together and achieve that common purpose. Now, traditionally, the common purpose of a corporation has been to maximize the profit of the shareholders, the people that have equity in that corporation. And that's probably how 90+% of the corporations in the world are organized, and then that's their purpose. But it doesn't necessarily have to be their purpose. You can come together in an association to try to not maximize profits, but rather maximize the sort of good you do in the world. And so I think, like all sort of human endeavors, the good or evil that a corporation does in the world is determined almost exclusively by the good or evil that the people involved in that corporation want to do in the world. And in that way, it's no different than any association of people. I think where we sort of go wrong in our society is that we've privileged corporations that seek profit in a variety of ways within our sort of legal structures. We've given them eternal life. We have imposed duties upon directors to maximize profits. We have treated them like people rather than legal entities, and we've given them massive tax advantages that we don't provide to ordinary people. All those things are changeable, but they're also all sort of divorced from the conversation of, what is a corporation and is it intrinsically good or evil?
Yeah, well, Fresh Hatties is a corporation. I always hear people being like, well, what about those corporate? I'm like, oh, you mean like the corporate douchebags? There should be like a different title where you could be a corporation or you can be like corporate douchebags. Because we know some corporations, just like some people, aren't good. And then we know other ones that are. And then there are ones that no matter how good they do. I was mentioning this earlier when Hilary mentioned that Canopy was going to donate $2.5 million to the project.
UBC.
Of opioids at UBC, that I saw immediately on Twitter, just her taking fire, like, oh, you guys had to name it Canopy Growth. It's like, well, yeah, we donated the money. Like, is that too much of a connection? Are we? I just thought it was amazing that even, Canopy gets called out for everything, no matter what they do, but even like a good thing, like they make a mistake. We all make mistakes, but if Canopy makes a mistake, they take like a serious beating, like, because there's this whole division, this division.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Kirk also just takes a beating sometimes. He'll just write the most innocent thing, and then people will just be like, Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson were talking about this the other day, and how it's this really...
Man, you got to bring that dude back up again. Come on,
listen, the conversation was really good. It was a really good conversation in regards to people responding on the internet to certain things. And if you pay too much attention to them, you can think, wow, am I like a really bad person? I'm getting a lot of hate. And it starts creating doubt. And it's not really this necessarily accurate thing when the people who are the most angry, who have the most energy to share, are not an accurate representation of the rest of the people that actually are thinking about these things. But they get warped, particularly in the person's mind who's taking the firing. And, Joe Rogan said to Jordan, like, you just can't read that stuff. Like, otherwise it could just drive you completely mental.
Well, and they're often the least educated about the subjects,
Right.
It's there's some justified anger out there as well, directed towards many, including, frankly, Jordan Peterson. But we don't want this conversation to digress too far down that path. Maybe it already has.
No.
If any of you are unfamiliar with his work, I'd suggest remaining that way. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's I'm not immune to going out there and provoking some of it as well, right? To be fair, but I think you have to sort of look at things in terms of their actions. If we want to solve the problems of sort of the corporate superstructure and the capitalist superstructure that we have in our society, and I heard somebody say this at a Drug Policy Alliance conference more than 10 years ago now, I guess. We were talking about legalization then, and it looked, frankly, like it wasn't coming anytime soon anywhere. But there was this sort of eternal discussion about whether corporate interests should be permitted to or cheered for supporting legalization initiatives because they are self-interested when doing so. And the guy stood up and he said, "Look, this plant's sort of illegal everywhere in the world, and I think it's putting an awful lot on the plant to not only become legal." And stop arresting people just for having it in their pocket, but also solve all the problems that exist because of our sort of history as a species and the existing economic superstructures that we labor under in capitalism in general. And I took that to heart then, and I sort of still believe it now, that I think when people consume cannabis, pathways in their mind open up that allow them to contemplate other ways of being and other ways about thinking about those issues, those major issues in our world. But I also don't know that we should be expecting to achieve some of the massive reforms that we need as a species on the backs of this legalization movement, right? It's a small piece of a bigger puzzle. And I think sometimes that gets confused.
I think it's not legalization, but regulation. It's a regulation market, and corporations can be good. So it's really definitely not a thing about just saying corporations are bad or good. So I think we can all agree that it's the energy behind the corporation that would make it good or bad, and it's up to the individual to find out what that means. I just think that oftentimes that structure tends to overtake. And then in the case of regulation in cannabis, what we have with the larger corporations is a disconnect from the medicine and the medicine makers that brought it forward. So it's like you have this umbrella of lawmakers and corporations, but there's the disconnect because they're not providing any of this medicine that we're all talking about as saving everyone's lives. what they're doing is they're providing a pathway for regulation. And once we provide the correct amount of dots and I's, we can provide, taxation to the system to allow us to provide our medicine. So right now we're at a point where we're just kind of trying to figure out the system. So we have corporations that have been in Canada that have been existing for years now, and they're totally having all their stuff figured out. And now and from our perspective, the true medicine makers are now just trying to figure it all out. And then so it just creates that's where the energy comes from of like, oh God, these corporations are killing us, and it makes it really difficult to feel like everyone is kind of doing a part to make it better. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is all of us are kind of doing our part to make it better. We're just at a point where it's really difficult to find value between each other. Sometimes we're just like, oh God, what have you done? But we're also, creating this community right here to empower each other.
Well, and I think that, I think I'll be brave enough just to talk about the elephant in the room, is that, I'm sorry, but what corporation forms to not make money is their number one thing? Very few.
Otherwise, it's
these
a nonprofit.
Huge, large corporations that have been set up in the cannabis industry, their number one goal is not medicine. It is not safe access. It is not safe for the earth. It's making money, because that's what corporations do. And I think that we have a bigger responsibility as corporations. Dragonfly Earth Medicine, we're also a corporation, because we had to become incorporated to even be able to step into this market. So it was like the path was already laid out for us as growers, as medicine makers. And I just don't think that path was necessarily a path that the plant wants us to go down, that this sentient being wants us to go down, that the patients want us to go down. And I feel like we do have a social responsibility to the plant. I think we do have a social responsibility to the patients. And I don't believe that the corporations that are in cannabis are upholding those social responsibilities right now. I believe that they have, openings of it. And I believe that they may wake up one morning and say, yeah, okay, I've got a social responsibility. And I'm not downing that. I think that it's absolutely imperative that they do show something of intention and goodness. But I think that we can do better. I think that we can all do better as large corporations. We have to do better.
So Kelly, you just called out exactly why I am where I am. Val said a little while ago that the last place she wants to be is a politician, and the second last place that she wants to be is in a boardroom, navigating, working inside a corporate structure. And I've chosen to take that on. And it's not always easy, and it's not always fun. And it's like learning a whole new language and a whole new landscape. I'd kind of rather be in a garden, to tell you the truth. But I see that there are massive economic drivers that are making other countries around the world start looking at repealing prohibition. And that there are other governments that are not looking at repealing prohibition because it's the right thing to do, or because of the tremendous amount of harms that the drug war have done, but that they're motivated to start looking at changing the regulatory framework because there are economic drivers to becoming a part of what is going to be a global industry. And so the force of capitalism, what you're talking about inside, why corporations are formed and what the focus of most of them are, it's this huge force of energy that is driving change around the world. And I would like to see cannabis legalized and regulated in a way that is reflective of this plant, that honors the plant and respects the plant. That's not about, we're going to legalize cannabis in a way that manages the risks of it, right? This is a huge compromise. Having other countries looking at changing their regulatory framework because they're driven by wanting to be a part of a global economy is not the right reason to do it. But is it harm reduction? Is it starting to create change and evolution? Like the legal framework that we have in Canada, we know all of the reasons and all of the places why it needs to keep evolving and where we need to keep working. Kirk's awesome rant about us being able to teach our children how to use cannabis safely, and the what we're talking about around the inclusion of all of the small farms and regulating cannabis production in a way where we're taking care of the earth and not hurting it. So I think that's the end of my rant. I don't think that I could wrap it up nicely other than to say that you and I talk about this offline, right? It's like trying to create the same kind of change from very different places. I mean, this phase of my activism is challenging, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
No.
I hear you 100%, Hilary. As a, I guess I'm the face here of corporate cannabis here because I do have a dispensary, and I have navigated through the very expensive and very difficult way of finally appearing in the legal market. But Valerie, we have never forgotten who we are. Berkeley Patients Group, it's in our name. We still provide free medicine to over 250 patients weekly. That was definitely, as Forrest said, made more challenging. And we had to make them actually get state cards because of the loopholes they had to go through. And a few people couldn't make that, and that was painful. And that didn't stop us from putting, A and B together so that, they're taken care of. There is still an underground network, with legalization. They said there was going to at least a third of the network was still going to stay illegal. And that's the reality that's transpired. And right now, we're volunteering our weekends to teach teachers and doctors right now because there's no education. Now that DARE's been pulled cannabis from its reality, we've created our own syllabus, and we're trying to educate the educators because they have no information out there to teach these kids anything. And they don't know about their laws. All they see is these kids are using vaporizers in classes now. And so we've been able to challenge that and them. On top of that, we had a group of heart surgeons come to us out of curiosity because there's no access of information in the state of California. So we've just taken it internally and gone to becoming educators, where we volunteer our space and our weekends and our time so that they can come. And they've been flocking. I mean, we had a whole swath of health educators from 7th grade all the way to seniors in high school that need the most basic information. So we can be good corporate people. Yes, Berkeley Patients Group was always a corporation, but we were acted as a nonprofit. We still give everything away. We still give to many organizations and still try to do things right. But unfortunately, we try to lead by example, and not many people are listening to our example. So that's not going to stop us. It's not going to cause us from moving in our reality. And it sucks being in board meetings and having to do the corporate things you have to do. But no better voice than ours that have been through the thick of it to actually be there to hold people accountable. But we need bigger voices. I've been saying from the beginning that the biggest sufferers are the dosage reality limited people, because I deal with patients. I have quadriplegic patients who need and require high dosage cannabis. And so we have to put them in touch with people so that they have to now go to the underground network and, have people make this, that way, and the other, put, chemists in touch with people so that they can do as best as they can reformulate things. The grassroots never stops. It's not going to stop. But unfortunately, there's too few of us holding that light in the dark. And it's getting harder and harder with these corporate rules. The cannabis that we grew or processed, we had in certain price points that we have 20 plus almost years of knowing what should be a quality, and we're seeing nowhere near the quality and the price ranges of what we're left with, the distribution realities that we're forced to deal with. So we're doing the best that we can in the limited realities that we have. Unfortunately, we hear you, Forrest, and we hear you, Valerie, and we're trying to do the best we can with the realities that we have. But we can't do everything, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, a lot of the problem is regulatory requirements. We got some great dispensary owners in our area here, but there's only so much you can do. And the penalties are so big for violating a lot of those rules that you can't risk all the work that's been done to violate them. And I think, I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that type of education. I hope other owners out there hear that, because it's absolutely necessary. I sit on a lot of panels when I'm invited. I've done some for with the school districts up here. And, I've just heard the most ridiculous stats and figures about risks come out of their mouth. And I'm sure, Etienne, you've seen this, but it's always when they ask them, where are you getting this information? It's from Sam every time, because it's the only really good, if you want to go find negative propaganda, that's where everyone ends up. But, we're teaching our kids just absolute false realities with this propaganda information that it's been discredited time and time again. And then they wonder why cannabis or other drugs have a reputation as a gateway drug, and it's keep telling them, if you lie to children,
right, the gateway lie
again, and then they go out and have an experience with cannabis, and it turns out that everything you told them was a lie, then they're going to think that everything about these other drugs is a lie as well. Well, they must have been lying about methamphetamines, and they must have been lying about heroin and these other things. And the damage done is very significant, in my opinion. So, I hope that...
And we are lying about those other drugs, too.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's definitely a difference in risk and harm and use, but yeah, absolutely. So, being able to get that education out there is important.
We're going to try on the board of the National Cannabis Industries Association, and they want to adopt our syllabus. And our syllabus is basically from the internet. We got the National Institute of Health, all their negative stuff, and then we got a lot of the other positives. So we balanced it out along with a lot of links so that they can also go and do their research. So what we're hoping is the NCIA adopts it so that in all 50 states, they'll have the access of the syllabus. And I think we're going to try and do a training video. And so anybody can then take this information and then go out there and do it themselves so they can regionally do it. So it's just a way that we're trying to find a way to locally activate people by giving them the knowledge and at least information so that they can then go with it. Because a lot of these people in all these states have become good communicators regarding cannabis. It's just they need better tools, and there's no tools out there. So until the state of California gets it up to date, we're the ones filling in that void. So it's not perfect. It's very introductory, but I think it's a little past the OU state of education, but there's still a lot people have to gain on themselves. And so that's why we try to impart them with a little bit of that in the syllabus so that they can research further. But no one hasn't come away from it better for it. And then after we do that, we kind of cheat, and then we take them through the dispensary so that we show them what the cannabis looks like, because majority of these doctors and teachers have never seen what cannabis looks like. They're all whipping out their cameras. They're so excited. Oh, look, I've never seen this is what a gram of cannabis looks like. Oh, wow, I thought it was much more than that, and then you show them an ounce so that they see, and it dispels a lot of that information that they've been told, because as you stated, you were amazed at the stupidity that we hear back from people all the time regarding their lies and misinformation that they ask consistently. So it's challenging, but it's something we volunteer and we do out of the love of, the education that needs to be there. Because if we don't do it, who else is going to? And as smoking circles, they'll fill you with so much misinformation. And so that's what started me in the first place, hearing that I smoke pot. I was brains. Carrera with his book Emperor Has No Clothes says, "That stupid boy." And if he hadn't been there to slap me over the head with that book, I don't know where I would be. So that education, we're trying to be that 100th monkey, that millionth monkey that takes that information and imparts on somebody so that they can take it and run with it and be that spark. I've done all I can at a certain resolve, so we need others to have fire and spread that fire within their local community. So the best way we can find is, like I said, through teachers and through doctors in the underground teaching way, if you can believe that, in 2018.
In a lot of ways, that's the real fun of it. And I bet Hilary enjoys that a lot, because that's a real important part of the work that she does. And when we were in Vancouver last at the Cannabis Hemp Expo, there was a lot of doctors there that really are basically just coming awake to the cannabinoid, really, because now the opportunity, they have the ability to, they're now able to connect with the cannabis plant. And we're seeing a lot of doctors that really have alienated themselves from it because of the laws. So now they're they're almost hungry for the information, because I think that doctors are partly trapped. Again, doctors are similar to this cannabis we're talking about. They're trapped by their system. There's a ton of things doctors can't do, and there's a ton of areas that that have taken themselves out of being healers. And I think doctors and initially were meant to be healers, but now we're seeing a whole new demographic, maybe of elders that didn't smoke or ingest before, and there's a lot of elders that are just experiencing it for the first time. So I think there's a tremendous need for people to just travel around and talk to different, I mean, people in Oklahoma and North Carolina, all these states that are just opening up right now. I mean, we're partly saturated in it. I mean, in a way, we're just like waiting for the next like thing to come out to learn the new bit of information. But there's, like you say, Etienne, a whole world of people out there that are just awakening to it. So, I mean, that's the real fun part of it all in a way, because you get to see people become awake to something that can help them, and then you see incredible changes. And I can only imagine what Forrest is, you know, and has seen over the years as just changes that have come. And I just want to, as we move forward, just recognize what we're all saying here is like we are having successes with the legalization, and I think that and the regulation in the world. And I think we just need to continue, even though we're not sleeping now, we have to continue not sleeping to continue to create the access to the medicine of the people.
I want to jump in. I want to first of all clarify that when speaking of corporations, and I agree with you, Marcus, there should be a distinction between corporation and corporation. And when I said I would not want to be sitting on the board, I would not want to be sitting on the board of Amazon to be their conscience, because that is not, that's not my work. I mean, maybe if Jeff Bezos ever dies, then yeah, if he's dying, I could be by his bedside. I would find that an honor. The rest of it, for me personally, is not my work. It's not where I can thrive, nor do I feel that I could serve in the greatest capacity. That's my personal. Now, we are not the enemy. Hilary, what you're doing and have been doing, the way that you've set your course and followed it is remarkable, and it's admirable. And that is what each of us is doing. I mean, that's my perception of each of the work of each of us. Etienne, of course, you know, that is, you guys continue to thrive by doing your good work and never turning your back on need. So need has many things, has many edges and sides, and it's an endless well. And our capacity to serve and to fill that takes an endless force of humanity. So the inspiration that we can provide is through our work, and that's the best thing that we can do. I mean, I know that I have nothing to teach. I'm not a teacher. I just I'm a student here in this, and I continue to be taught by powerful human beings. And
sister, you taught us all. Don't you realize everybody sitting before you is because of your inspiration and what you did and the light that you held in the darkness that touched all of our torches, so we held our lights too for others?
Thank you, Etienne.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you, Valerie.
Valerie, 100%. You've passed on the light to all of our candles. You have been an incredible mentor and teacher, I know, to me.
We would do anything to support you.
Well, I really appreciate that, and that's why I think I'm calling out that we push back against. Look, Amazon. When I found out, was last year, I guess, Monsanto is working directly with Jeffrey Guy. And I have to admit, Jeffrey, the only time I met Jeffrey Guy, I wouldn't say he and I agreed fully on or even, you know, I do agree, and I do support the use of medicine and the access to medicine. I know that medical cannabis is an important piece. And the reason I feel it is important for me to change language is because when I see that legalization and regulation have nothing to do with freedom. They have everything to do with control. So to instruct us all of us that have done so much work have had our feet on the ground and had the heads of the human beings that are suffering in our laps, and held an opportunity to serve people in the greatest possible way, in the capacity that we can, to be subject to a body of rules that not only restricts but prevents us from doing the work that we need to do. That is in part, my belief, been instituted by a corporate state, meaning the bad boys of corporate, and I say boys, sorry, my sexism, the bad doers of the managers and controllers of the corporate state. And when I say corporate state, I mean those corporations who influence politics. Because it isn't me, it isn't you, it isn't our corporations that are necessarily influencing politics. And Hilary, I agree with you, we have to influence that politic. So, but they are not hearing how to serve. They're hearing the fears that governments always hear around abuse and lack of control. And abuse is often considered abuse because there is a lack of control by those that are the torch bearers for that control, for holding a line. And so when I heard that Monsanto was working with, had now created the genetically modified medicines, plants that are the medicine to be delivered by GW Pharmaceutical, both in America as soon as it becomes legal, which it obviously will, it will become a pharmaceutical, then I felt I'm correct in changing language from medical cannabis to phytotherapies, because it is a plant, and because what we serve is it is the health of mind, the health of body, the health of consciousness. It's a deeper relationship on the human level. And then it also is the health and welfare of our nations, of our planet. And it is far more complex than our language allows, or my language allows me to speak to. So with that in mind, and this is another piece that I think is so valuable, I think it is an imperative to work in the realm of trade, that we barter and trade outside of this failure of capitalism. Capitalism is has an innate it's innately flawed. Why? Because it does not value wellness. It does not value happiness. It has no means by which to measure the profit, the true profit of a healthy and thriving humanity and planet. And that's why it is innately flawed. And that's why I think it needs to be turned on its head. And that's why I think it's our job to do so.
Mic drop.
Absolutely. And I think as humans, it's really interesting. We continue to build fences, but yet we want to be free. We're a very interesting species. That's all I have to say about it.
And I also just really appreciate everything you said. And I just feel like it's safe to say that at this point, since legalization, we've lost access. So at this point, we've lost access, and we have to do all we can to gain it back.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the best access I have experienced in this 25 to 30 years experience that I've had was getting my MMAR. Getting my MMAR was like, wait a minute, so I can grow cannabis and then I can possess cannabis anywhere I am. And then thanks to Owen Smith and the good group of lawyers that represented him, all of a sudden you could process cannabis, which was just this unbelievable. I didn't need to sell it. I was just happy to be able to possess it, to be able to grow it, to be able to process it. Like, to me, that was a huge step in changing my perspective and my perception on cannabis, and feeling that, constant feeling of like, you know, I just don't, before that, I always felt like I was going to get in trouble, that I was just like, I wasn't allowed, I was so paranoid driving, especially once I got pulled over at my roadblock, which was actually with 6 kilos, sorry, not 3. It just was this crazy fear that I thought, wow, like this is just me being afraid for my own person. Imagine how much of this vibration is currently happening on the planet in countries like Malaysia, where they hang you, in countries or states like Alabama, where they just give you 10 years, you know, like it's no big deal. Like, oh, you had 6 kilos. Like, well, you get 10 years and you get 10 years and you get 10 years. And just to be able to remove myself a little bit from that frequency was huge.
Yeah.
I think that you talk about legalization when you get, you know, the fact that people aren't getting arrested, that if we could combine that feeling of not getting arrested with the feeling of having an MMAR, and then the feeling of being able to grow like herb on your own land, if we could combine all 3 of those things, you know, along with the access, I mean, now we're talking about legalization and true freedom. I mean, right now we're dying. We're dying without medicine. We're dying as a farm. We're getting crushed right now, and it's really, really difficult. I mean, we're still drinking good drinks and eating good food to keep the vibes going, but you know, it's something that we really are having to work really hard to gain that access back. So Forrest, I would love to do, if we could do one thing in life, it would just be grow medicine and give it away. And if there was like a magic fairy that could just put enough money in our bank account to, like, you know, pay off the other things, that would be fine. We would just grow and develop strains and give all the weed away so we could save human beings on Earth. That's all we would do.
That's the sort. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say that's just the sort of difficult reality of the superstructures that we live in, right? Because legally in Canada right now, you can grow medicine and give it away. You're absolutely legally permitted to do that, and you can even grow sort of an MMAR amount of medicine and give it away, either in the designated caregiver role that's allowed to you, or simply because you can now give away cannabis. So the difficulty, of course, is you got to pay your bills. And that's the structure that we in. And so if you want to pay your bills also by growing cannabis, now we've moved into a situation where we have a regulated market for doing so that is incredibly difficult to access, and far too difficult to access, which I think goes back to sort of Hilary's point of there has to continue to be progress made in allowing people to participate in this in an economic way so that they can pay their bills and achieve their goals, whatever those goals happen to be. And we're not there yet, but I think we're now at a place where we can have that conversation instead of the old conversation, which was, you know, everybody involved in this industry is a criminal, and you know, marijuana is a criminal activity and it's all crime. And I think the beauty of legalization sort of spreading, and I think it's accelerating. I think the spread of legalization is accelerating in a highly regulated manner, is that you now are able to take cannabis out of the category of criminal as a society, as a culture, as law, as politics, and you put it over on the other side of, you know, it's an imaginary line, but I think it's very, very real. You put it over on the not criminal side, and doctors begin to be able to have the conversations and learn more, to the point that was made earlier. People at the table with their kids get to be able to have conversations in a different way than they would have had them when cannabis was over in the illegal side. And so as long as we can keep marshaling all the different forces that want to change that categorization, I think that'll start spreading. It'll spread quicker. And as a result, more people will learn the truth about this plant, and more people will consume it, which will allow those people to let it guide you to the understandings of the bigger issues we're talking about, of how we relate to each other as humans, of how we relate to the planet, of how we conduct all of our affairs and our intentions. And I think it's going to gain momentum, but we have to switch that category so that it will continue to gain those momentums.
You know, this goes back to what Valerie said about turning the whole industry upside down on its head, and it being our role to do that. I think what we're talking about is trying to spread an idea, and ideas are powerful. Capitalism is going to try to do to cannabis what it does to everything, right? Chew it up, spit it out, exploit it, maximize profit. But if we can help encourage a culture that wants to see a different model, I think there is an opportunity for some impact there. If we have a culture of consumers who shop responsibly, look for socially responsible models, support those industries, support those businesses, you're going to see an impact on those who aren't coming into cannabis with that sort of mind. If we can encourage also, we all have to pay our bills, right? But there's a lot of other different localized models you can use, community gardens, community compassion programs that really work on local levels, as opposed to trying to start companies who are dealing with, a whole state or a whole, province or area. There's different models that we can set up that can help do that and take care of the critical need, as well as be successful in our businesses at the same time. We have, it's not every day you get to be at the start of what's going to be such a huge economic force in industry. We weren't around when automobiles were invented, right? I missed the Silicon Valley tech bubble, although that's still kind of going. This is the beginning of something that I think, with a cultural awareness and an expectation of responsibility from the beginning, we can help influence that a little bit. And, it does seem kind of a pie in the sky dream thing, but, cultural expectations do shift and change the wheels, although it's slow. We see it in civil rights issues. We see it in other issues in our communities. We can expect a level of giving back some of that pie out of companies in a way that really impacts our communities. Because the reality is, where it's different with cannabis, is everyone should be motivated to do this, because we are all going to be patients one day. Even if you're a patient now, but your need is light, our time is short. Something's going to get us. And cannabis helps such a wide variety of conditions that there's a good chance we're all going to need this someday. And when we can set up a structure that, when you have, heaven forbid, you're diagnosed with a type of glioblastoma, right, or cancer that later in life, and as opposed to becoming medically bankrupt, like Valerie was speaking about, having an infrastructure that is immediately set up to then care for you, that you funded your whole life by shopping responsibly, supporting those companies, and then when you have the diagnosis that qualifies for the community to come and care for you, you're cared for, and you don't have to worry about where you're going to get 1,500 milligrams a day of both THC and CBD to give your system a shock and awe dose to hopefully fight some of these diseases that cannabis can be effective on. And I think some of it is just about having these type of conversations and getting that out there and making that an expectation. Our industry is going to be different. We're going to shift some of our values into it from the beginning. And it starts at the consumer. And if the consumer thinks it's important, the businesses will follow. Speechless, I know.
Very well said, Forrest. And I liked Kirk's opinion as well about just, we said a similar thing years ago in '94, my partner and I, Martin, and we were trying to get hemp grown in Manitoba. And it was just, we were having to visit ministers and do all these things that we might as well have been on an alien spaceship. Actually, we would have for sure been more at home and more comfortable on an alien spaceship than we were in some of those situations. And when we got the first 5 acres growing, Martin said to me, he said, this is going to change the way people think. And I was kind of like, what do you mean? I was pretty young. He's like, well, just seeing this existing is going to push against belief systems and foundations that, I'm telling you, it's going to rock people. It's going to rock people. And slowly but surely, it was literally a couple years later, Hilary was doing the Compassion Club. Like a couple years later, you knew her name, Hilary, from the Body Shop, had the big full-size pot leaves in the malls. Like, it just sort of like, it affected the way people thinks. And that was on still the other side of that illusionary, slowly we were pushing it over, but now with sort of decrim or legalization 1.0, whatever you want to call it, at least here in Canada, it will change the way people think in a drastically, like, never to go back the way it was way. I've already seen tons of people that were quite against cannabis for no other reason other than the fact that it was illegal. It was just quite, there's a huge population, the huge proportion of the population that are absolutely, that's as simple as it is for them. If it's in the newspaper and they tell you it's good, it's good. If it's in the newspaper and they tell you it's bad, it's bad. And so when you realize that there's a huge amount of people, maybe like the majority of our populace, that's how they think and that's how they learn, then it's important to put what we're talking about onto the other side of the imaginary line. And for sure, the same people from this side are going to try and control it, and they're going to try to maintain and contain it. But I think Kelly was saying earlier, it cannot be contained. You can't stop it. It's sorry.
Can I throw in two things that are sort of odd? One of them is to do with the capitalism thing we were talking about. Goldman Sachs, to name a high temple of capitalism, does really good research on things to guide investors. And just saw a thing recently. They were looking at cannabis companies as investment opportunities, and were cautioning the folks who might use their guidance that the problem with cannabis as medicine is it actually works. People don't, it's not like pharmaceuticals where you have to get it renewed every day and it gets really insanely expensive. In fact, people can grow their own and it's like a problem for big money. Worth looking for if that's an interesting topic to you. The other thing that I wanted to throw in, sort of an odd bit, talking to a friend who knows researchers.
Sorry.
Thank you. Researchers at the University of California down in Davis, which is one of the ag universities here in California. They're working with dairy cows, and they're under hemp. They're giving cannabis to cows to see what it does to them. And the report is, and this is not published data yet, but it's just word of mouth. Not only are they seeing increased milk production, but even more significantly, they saw an unexpected side effect. The cows are producing less methane, which is a greenhouse gas. And I think it's because the cow's digestive system is working better. They're having better gut health, and so producing, using their food better, and therefore producing less methane. And I think that over the next couple of years, the whole hemp conversation, particularly as it relates to agriculture, is going to help normalize, just like Marcus was saying a minute ago. That first 5 acres started changing the conversation in Vancouver. I think the same thing is happening in California, despite the regulation mindset that's really just another manifestation of prohibition. So, yeah. And meantime, the plant is insanely resilient, and we are all incredibly creative and determined. And it's a shame that California's legal framework is playing out the way it is. And I think that any of us that are working with people who need this plant in its various preparations as medicine, we can't stop doing how do you say no to a family that's seeing benefit for their child? If you have to share. You have to make it available. And as for the corporate thing, it's as Kirk was saying, a corporation is just a way of people associating together to do a certain work. The shame of corporate's identity at the moment is that, for most practical purposes, it's only about making money for your shareholders. So that's a thing that can be changed. And the plant is going to help with that. It's just, it's a shame what's happened in California and all across the world. We have to help the people who are writing the rules that don't know anything about cannabis to understand what went wrong in California so they might get it closer to right. And I think it has everything to do with an individual's right to cultivate their cannabis as they see fit wherever they are. And there should be a supply chain where cultivars, be they seeds or clones, are available for those individuals to grow what they need, and information available about how to make their own medicine. And that way, pharmaceutical companies and governments cannot own this plant. Every person should have the right.
And, to add something to what you're saying, Wade, is that, if we're feeding the cows hemp, then the milk that they're producing also has traces of CBD. A friend of ours did a study on feeding his chickens 20% CBD, and then tested the egg yolks. They had 3% CBD in it. And that's a way that we can actually start getting cannabinoids into people. And I think that that's really important. And I also wanted to address, Hilary, what you were saying earlier, is that it is absolutely imperative for access around the world right now. I work in disaster relief areas. I work in Indonesia. I've worked in Haiti. I've helped hundreds of people dying. And if I could just have had, and birthing, and women in birthing situations and horrible trauma, after the tsunami or after the earthquake that happened. And if I had had cannabis, things would have been incredibly different. And I can't tell you how many times that I wished that these countries had safe access, because I know that we would be able to deal with those issues and those traumatic situations in such a better way. I mean, better is, like what Valerie said, there's such a lack of words that I have in lieu of what this plant provides.
I really don't necessarily connect with the use of the term drug either. I really like the term essential nutrient, because it really is an essential nutrient in our neurological system and in the cows to not produce methane or whatever it is. And it does have an effect on our mind, which, it does put it into a different category, but how you feel after you haven't eaten in a while, or different foods that connect with our system. So we like to think of it as an essential nutrient, and in that way it frees it up and allows us to feed it to our animals and everything.
I mean, it's a medicine or a drug. I think where people confuse is that it's not a narcotic, and that's really where that confusion comes in, where we look at we've lost the ability to, with words and definitions these days. We see that on Twitter and Facebook. Words don't have meanings, but cannabis isn't a narcotic in the way that these other drugs are, but the benefit that it can provide is amazing. I mean, think of the different world we'd be living in. I'll get off the big dreams topic for a moment, but if we subsidized hemp like we did corn, and filled the Midwest with hemp instead of corn, and use that for livestock feed, and use that for biofuels, and use that for the endless amount of industries that hemp can be beneficial for, we would see that trickle into pretty much every aspect of our life, from our food to our air to our water and up. And it would be, that's a benefit that it's amazing that it's just not really something that is on the radar. I would think if I was just corporately minded, that would be a big motivator to get involved in that industry and really push that. And luckily we've seen hemp added to the farm bill, so we'll see. But if we can start to make this shift, I mean, in 30 years, our communities could look very different than they do now. In every topic, it's from global warming to our diets, to our health, to our food, very different world. And that's where hemp looks at like this big issue where it's, people say it's a miracle, and it's not magic. Well, some believe it's magic. I don't know about magic. But it's one of the most amazing plants on the planet, and its introduction into every aspect of our life can lead to nothing but benefit.
It's the only medicine with no lethal dose.
And the best side effect ever. Just being honest.
And it can
Long rip, mother lovers.
When we went to Romania, we went to a place where they used to grow hemp, you know, for the as a livelihood, and they made their clothes from it, and they you know, fed their fodder, fed their animals. And after the fall of the USSR and communism, they stopped subsidizing hemp in the countryside and went towards, you know, other types of farming and poly, you know, to make the ropes and everything that they were doing. So when we went to those parts of Romania that were growing hemp, now the government is just subsidizing them to stack hay and grow hay and have fields of hay. So it's interesting to see how on Earth we've gone through so many different cycles of ways that, you know, we've okayed it and not okayed it. And there was amazing fabrics that we saw there that people were still wearing that had been made, you know, 50 and 60 years ago. And it was kind of frustrating to not see hemp growing everywhere, but it was interesting to see how in that system people were able to grow it, and it was subsidized by the government at the time.
Right here in the United States, the original copies that exist of the Declaration of Independence are written on paper made of hemp.
And I think we're going to see hemp have a resurgence in the U.S. with federal reforms in place, both in the U.S. and Canada. I mean, I think that, you know, we've had that now category switch where it's going to be of interest to large economic drivers, and you know, that's the other side of it, is for hemp to sort of take off and to be used for all these purposes that we know it can be used for. The reality of the world we live in is there also has to be an economic case for that, right? Because to grow millions of hectares of plants and harvest them and turn them into things requires fairly significant infrastructure and a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of people and equipment and all of those things. And so that economic case has to exist, or the capital won't flow to the activity and it won't occur. I think it does exist, and I think we're going to see more and more of it start happening now that some of the restrictions that our laws have put into place are falling away.
Well, after 23 years of growing hemp in Canada and hemp oil and hemp hearts being really like 95%, maybe more, I was just in one of the largest hemp processing facilities in Manitoba recently when I was there for a hemp conference and meeting with farmers. All the farmers, their value is the essential amino acid rich seed oil and the hemp hearts and the protein powder isolates that come from the seed cakes after they've been cold pressed. And you just you don't see, you know, when we approached our minister, it was really about these 50,000 commercial products, all these amazing products that you could make from it. And we really quickly learned as well that it was the and it's I believe it's past hundreds of millions. I believe it's in the billions of dollars of infrastructure that are required for these things to exist. And it was kind of utopian of us to think otherwise. They just kept it illegal for so long and allowed all these other technologies to take the place to deal with the plants that they were processing, whether it be cotton or flax or whatever. And so hemp just was so far behind that it's managed to, I could really see the CBD thing, the cannabinoid thing, being able to grow monomolecular medicines, maybe not the highest quality full plant spectrum, but for producing monomolecular medicines like CBD and THC, that you wouldn't be able to grow it any cheaper. And that would allow potentially for farmers to make, you know, the kind of money, and producers and processors to make the kind of money that they could then turn around and put their money where their mouth is and say, yeah, we want to start a plastics program with the hemp seed husks from the seed, or and some of the fiber and cellulose, or we want to start a paper project, or doing things that, you know, would require this infrastructure on a very, it's big infrastructure. It is not small.
I think just to tie a bow on all this, though, what this conversation shows me is that there is really no limit to social good opportunities if you want to work with cannabis and hemp. You know, I focus on patients. A lot of the people here are patient focused, but the ability, as far as I'm concerned, having a cannabis entity or organization take your pick. There's no shortage of things that you can do. And if you're choosing not to, hey, that's everybody's right. But I don't think it's in the spirit of cannabis, our community, and our culture. When there's so much in the world that this plant and business with this plant has the opportunity to affect, from plastics to regenerative agriculture to, eliminating need for other dangerous industries, patient care, really take your pick. Just have that thought in the front of your mind as to, while I do this, what am I looking to impact? What benefit do I want to bring to the community more than just financial gain? And I think that that's something that if we can put as part of the culture and in the conversations, I think only good can come out of it. Oh, look who's here.
I think that it's really interesting too, is that, talking about large ag, we're talking about corn industry or the soybean industry and, tobacco or, even the forest industry and how it's taken over. This plant is an adaptogen. It is a master plant. It has the ability to think past that. A lot of these plants are not master plants in the same way. They can be controlled, and we've seen it over and over again. And I'd like to think that the people that are supporting this plant are also adaptogenic. And I think that we have vast amounts of ability to move forward in this industry. And we're seeing a resurgence in hemp. We're seeing a resurgence in cannabis because that's the nature of an adaptogen. That's what adaptogens do. And I see that also within this community. We are an adaptogenic community and we're not going away. And I believe that, to tie a bow on it as well with this conversation is that all of these people here on this panel are incredible adaptogens, and we're all moving forward to make a change in this industry, but also to make a change in the world. And I just have faith that the plant is going to continue to show her face over and over again all over the planet. And whatever we can do to help guide her and help aid her in that path is what we need to do. I had a conversation many years ago with Ram Dass. And he was sitting backstage somewhere. It was all by himself. And I had 2 doobies in my pocket. And I was like, oh, this is an incredible opportunity. Well, 3 hours later after the conversation, what I really picked up out of that conversation is that he made the differentiation between the pointer and the moon. All of us are pointers, and the moon is the plant. So how is it that we can continue to point at the moon so that she can move forward in an adaptogenic way to change the world?
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Kelly, and welcome, Skunkman Sam. I like the new angle. I see he's on this sort of couch now. I can hear you.
Am I there?
You are there, or here. It depends on how you look at it. Are you the moon or are you the pointer? You're definitely the pointer.
I'm a little bit late because I was out having dinner with my daughter.
Ah, well, wonderful. We wouldn't want to keep you from that. We've just been having a great conversation about all things cannabis. We got Valerie Corral's in the room, and Hilary Black, and Forrest, and Wade, and the Dragonfly Earth Medicine crew. And we got Kirk Toussaw. So welcome. Welcome to the conversation. I'm sure you'll stir shit up for us, Sam.
No, I'll just say, howdy, Valerie.
Howdy, howdy. Don't you look beautiful? Decked out for the
yeah, he's always got the sparkly boa on.
So it always comes into play during this season, right? Is that a hemp boa?
Oh, that's right. It's the season. I forgot.
That's right. Well, it's always a season for you. You look so dashing.
Yeah. Well, only one time did Sam accidentally show part of his chin on Hash Church. Kind of stepped into the camera.
I'm still living that down.
I mean, I thought we got a little arm there a second ago.
We've had arm.
Tape,
We've had arm.
tape.
He does arm, no problem. He does not do face. Only for the lucky few.
And Valerie, you just got greetings from my wife, Diana. She sends her love.
Oh, she's muted if she's talking.
Muted it. Wait, backwards. I'm just so taken by your beauty. I just want to say much love and big hug back. Thank you. It's great to see you. Great to connect.
Hash Church, it's where we connect. There's there's hundreds of people, and they're watching and listening to what we're saying, and they're also having their own conversation over on YouTube. And I have to say, aside from the odd troll, good group of people in there. Really, you can kind of read the real-time inspiration that's occurring after things are said. And it's great that our conversation, of course, the purpose of this conversation is to continue other conversations and to create action. And so it's neat to be able to just see some of the, maybe 100 or 200 of the 500 or 600 that are watching at any given time are just having this conversation, and you can see that spark in real time being ignited. And obviously there's a bunch of it that we can't see, but it definitely feels like it's the good work. I always, this channel, I've always said it, it's kind of the metaphor of the corporate greed versus the grassroots. And so for me, once again, always sort of seeing that group of pioneers that have really brought this for what I consider the truest, most righteous reasons, has allowed me to do that with the channel, and not just make the channel about me and try to promote my products and make sales, but be like, how can I make this channel like better? And in the last month, this channel has gotten over 1.1 million views in the last 28 days on this channel. So
hallelujah.
That's a lot of views. Like that's
Congrats, man.
Tell the truth, Marcus. You get $1 for every viewer.
You know what? They actually paid me $970 for last month's episode, but I'm happy to donate it to WHAM and to the Caladrius Network. And
I had no idea you were getting money. I was joking.
No, that I've monetized my channel for listen, I used to work for a YouTube monetization company, and I went to Jamaica. And my thing was to explain to my Jamaican artist friends that have many who have been ripped off by producers and this, that, and the other thing, offer them a way to create revenue when people are listening to their music. And so I turned a bunch of them onto it, including Toots from Toots and the Maytall. I signed a bunch of these different bands, and it was a no-brainer. It's like, listen, people are already listening. YouTube is where young people go to listen to music. And after learning and teaching them about why wouldn't you monetize your channel to do whatever, whether Soldiers of Jah Army, they didn't want to monetize their channel. I said, listen, monetize it and donate the money. You guys are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars over the many, many tens and 20s and 30 million views your videos get, and also convince them to do it. So it was, it taught me in a sense that it would make no sense not to monetize my channel, but at the same time, do good things with that monetization.
It gives people that support the message of the artist or the content creator a way to thank them and support them for creating the content, right? Mm-hmm. My kids sort of do a lot of YouTube watching and Twitch watching as well. So I've sort of looked into this sort of phenomenon of sort of self-directed economic activity where there's only a small intermediary between the artist or the content creator and the ultimate consumer that wants to help them. And it's pretty fascinating because there's all these things are available free, but you can also choose to economically support those people. And lots of people make that choice. I think that's kind of wonderful to have that ability.
I haven't shared this, but, I don't think people realize how big of an impact can be had, with very little, monetary donation, which is why, we get back to, everybody going to the Emerald Cup, everybody going to these other festivals. Please start to ask the people that you're speaking with, what are they doing in their community? What social good programs are they getting involved with? But, the Caladrius Network has been running above ground for a little over 2 years now. And in that time, because we're being shut down in a few weeks, we're getting everything we can out to families to help tide them over until we can get the laws changed. Looking at our books, we have donated in the last 2 years, at this point, we're at about $956,000 worth of medicine. And I think my goal by January 9th, when the collective model ends in California, is we're going to top over $1 million worth of donations to families. That is with monetary donations to the Caladrius Network for the last 2 years being under $12,000. So with less than 12 grand and some community volunteers and an amazing cannabis community, we've been able to donate over $1 million, or we will get there. We're going to donate over $1 million by January 9th worth of medication to families. And so, you know, I share that, and I haven't shared this in the past because to me it sounds a little egocentric, but a lot of people wonder, like, does this do any good? You know, the people putting little donations up here in Hash Church or donating to WHAM or these others, it's amazing the amount of benefit that comes out of every nickel that is donated to some of these nonprofits. And I just want to know that everything that people have done to support us over the last 2 years has paid off significantly for the people that we were hoping to help. And I just want to see that attitude continue to move forward in every state in the United States and in Canada, because these programs, Hilary's and others that are instituting social good programs in there, they need the support. And when you do support them, it pays off. And we were really shocked to see the numbers that we had once we finally went into the books and looked at everything.
Congratulations, Forrest. That's amazing.
Right, we can't, none of us can do it without you. Excuse me, Kirk, sorry. None of us can do it without all of you. You know, it's not, we don't do this alone. It never has been alone. So even with the opportunity to, hold on, there's a little bit of noise in my home. And given the opportunity to serve one another and being able to, you know, and I appreciate your kindness toward me, but it's never been done alone. It's always been a massive movement with all of us holding our place and holding the line. And because the cannabis awareness is a movement already, and plant healing and the sacred plants healing us, allowing us the opportunity to use them for our own benefit, and I think as well for their benefit. It makes a huge front. It makes a profound impact. Being able to serve people at their greatest time of need is a massive reward. So whatever money, and I know that you agree with this, Forrest. Etienne, he's not here right now, but all of us every one of us here who shares, that's such a rich reward, powerful. And while we do need to pay rent, and I know it differently now since I don't have my land anymore, that the really profound impact is something that lasts forever and touches everybody. So we really have a great job, and we do it together. And I'm super proud to be with you allies, and super gratified. You know, it's rich and yummy. Thanks.
And that's a beautiful thing to talk about, you know, after everything we've gone through, and to find the rich and yummy section and go there is what feels good. And it's a big part of our farm network is to have social work that you do and things that you give to. So our farm network, it's a big part of what we do is to have them donate to different groups. So, you know, we see that as really, really important. It's a way that we can give back to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I want to put it out to, you know, if Forrest and Wade are not going to that until January 4th, our first Caladrius network can accept donations. So anybody who has CBD or has the ability to give away, you know, any extra flower or medicine to the Caladrius Network, please do that. It's absolutely imperative that they can continue their work in helping children. So this is a call out to all farmers in California and all CBD farmers throughout the U.S. Caladrius can take donations, and they need your donations.
And support WHAM.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've slowed down on asking for things because we're not really sure what it's going to look like. We can, and she's right, we are taking them. I've just slowed down publicly asking because, one, I never want to accept a nickel or a dollar or a donation that isn't going to go where I say it's going to go. And it's really hard. We're just in this period right now where, once again, we're being forced into the black market. And how, so we're looking at, we can and are accepting donations. And I appreciate that very much. And equal to that, we just need people's continued support to keep alive in the conversation that some of the patients that our cannabis laws were built on the backs of have now cast them aside. And you know, we just need to see that change. And everything that's donated to us up until the deadline is going to be immediately given out. And what our goal, what we've been trying to do, on top of, you know, taking care of my own son and his needs, is get, you know, a year to 18 months worth of medicine out to every single family. So we're going to get it donated prior to the deadline, and then give us this cushion. But that's not, again, that doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't help the families we've had to not take on. We've had to close our enrollment. That, you know, it's very difficult to tell a family no, or to, which I haven't yet. One's in hospice, but you know, as they're coming, the families who are coming saying, you know, our daughter's in hospice. We heard about your organization. The doctors say that might be the only thing that can save her. She's not expected to live throughout the week, and have to say, well, we're being shut down. So I cannot stress enough how important it is for the community's help to continue this message. Senator Wiener in California is going to be announced that he's reintroducing the compassion legislation that I and others have been working on for 2 or 3 years now, that was vetoed by the government, or by Governor Jerry Brown, that put us in this bad situation. We're going to need support as that gets closer to coming to fruition again this legislative season. It's just, I just want to keep the hope alive. Donations, support, spreading the message, you know, anything you guys can do there will literally translate into saving lives. Adults in cases like WHAM and Weed for Warriors, children in cases, you know, like the Caladrius Network. It's not a feel-good exaggeration talking point. Hey, we're going to save lives. For some of us, we see it every day. It's very literal. It's tangible. You see the eyes of the parents and the mother. You see the death. You get invitations to the funerals. It's real. And it's just heartbreaking that it's on the back burner. But with the help of you know, communities like this, we can make a real impact.
Bravo.
Sorry, I don't mean to get too heavy. It's just, you know, it really is. It's been quite an experience the last 2 years.
You're not too, no. I mean, the truth of it is the reason why people like Marcus and I have been helping so much is for people like you. And the benefit that I've gotten is I want cannabis to be legalized for people everywhere. And yeah, you're definitely a big part of that.
So what's so moving is when you think of being silenced and being shut down, of all the people that you can't reach, it feels it's disempowering, and it feels hopeless. And I know that you don't believe that. I know that there is a way for us collectively together to serve and to find an answer to this particular problem that's profound, and it's right at the very top of the list. Because if tomorrow or January 1st, people are not served, if lives are not saved because of restrictions that are just unjust and absolutely, they're meaningless. So yes, there's risk involved, but there's always risk involved in doing what's good and what's right, because that is not driven by profit. Like imagine that you had so much good you couldn't even count it or spend it. If you did it every moment of every single day for the rest of your life and every other lifetime you possibly could get. So that's the goal, and that's the work. And trust that you are you have comrades, and that will help, and that the point that we are trying to do with WHAM is to expand it to become ever more inclusive, because always we've been, for 25 years, our work has been done through attrition. Come in, who's the sickest? How do you weigh those things? Like who's suffering? How do you weigh suffering and access? So we just trust that we'll find a way to do this. And you and I will just talk privately and about what is profoundly important, human life and diminishing suffering, and the life of the very planet that we are consuming for our own benefit, and how we create balance in that exercise of kindness.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how we're all gonna move forward, because that there's no stopping. There's no choice to stop. It wasn't a choice for me to get involved in this, although I'm glad in a lot of ways that I did. But it was illness that brought me here, like so many others, and that's not going away because the law has changed. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let my son go without because of the law. And if I'm working to help my son, then how could I not help others that come? It's kind of how the Caladrius Network started. We had some community gardens. A couple parents saw reports in the newspaper and other things and said, "Hey, could you help us?" And it's like, how do you not, right? So I'm excited to see kind of how it moves forward. But at the same time, the risk is that we're back where we were years ago, where we set up gardens, we get them going for children or patients, and they're just cut down. Or here in Sierra County, right next door to us, they're not even putting up gate notices anymore. They literally bring the bulldozer on the back of a truck and just bulldoze over the gate, over the garden, drive the bulldozer back up on the truck and leave. That's where we're at right now. And if that's legalization, then we've got a lot more work to do. No respect whether it's a legal, medical garden. No worrying about what has been, if there's scripts or recommendations of some of those that are still compliant in California, just bulldozing them. So that it's that uncertainty that is terrifying. When you're dealing with life or death treatments. We shouldn't have to worry about being bulldozed to save our child's life or our mother's life or our father's life or our own. This should be something, that sort of ability should be rooted into the very nature of our communities. And again, not to beat a dead horse, pardon the horrible expression, but this is why I think it's just got to be in our daily conversation. And it's not as much. And there's people watching this show, and there's people on the show who get interviewed. We get interviewed for local media, for papers. We do panels and discussions. Like a lot of us are going to be at the Emerald Cup here pretty soon. And I just want to encourage and request that where you're able to insert some of these realities into those conversations, because that's it's ideas that are going to change our landscape. And what I found is as people know and are educated, the majority of people are essentially good and they want to see it change. So really, the more that we can encourage that and encourage sort of these topics to be brought up and inserted into other conversations for those of us who have a platform, I would definitely appreciate it greatly. And I know that it would have a real impact.
We got you covered on that one. We're on panels. Your network is on our website, and we'll put Valerie's on there too. And any chance we get to be a voice for anyone doing good. We totally agree with you that it's almost our duty, if we have a platform, to make use of it. So,
and I encourage everybody else out there who's listening, who do have a large platform, that this is a very important, potent conversation. I like to say potent, because I think that that's fun, and I think that it's important, but it really is truly important. And let's use our platform
no matter
for the
where
good.
you are. Yeah, thanks, Marcus.
I think it's as simple as this, Forrest, that you just don't stop doing anything, and that you bring it to the media's attention when things are done. Like, how can you arrest people that are helping like very ill children? Like, it's just there's no leg to stand on in that argument. Like, it would be you would change the laws in the first case that went through. Like, nobody is that ignorant to not see the suffering that I see right now on your face. That's not acting. That's the real deal, dude.
Excuse me, Marcus. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I just wanted to say it's not that the arrest, because nobody in their right mind would do that, but it's it eliminates the ability to practice, to go into business. So you violate the tenets of the law, and then you're eliminated from continuing in that process. So that's why we have to create the umbrella that and the cradle that holds all of us safely to do our work, because really it's about outcome, and the only way to achieve the outcome that we are seeking is to hold one another in that grace that we hold one another in, that we recognize that we are equal, and that we function with equanimity and balance. And how do we do that? By supporting one another, because there is no one better to do any of this work than all of us.
Yeah, I think it's a 7-year ban? That's written.
7-year ban.
Yeah,
yes.
If you're caught working outside the regulated market, which is it's an incentive for a reason, and it's a good one. But it makes a real question as to how to move forward. But we're running out of time, so that's another show.
It's every show.
Yeah, seriously.
It was Mahatma Gandhi who talked about fighting unjust laws. And one of the things that I am certain is going to happen is that people will continue to resist this version of an unjust law. This plant has no lethal dose, and it has such amazing properties in the proper preparations, not just for those in desperate need, but for the general health of all beings and for the health of our planet. So, I think each of us are part of a group of people who are standing up to this new version of prohibition. And I know in my work supporting Forrest, you can't say no to these families. How do you do that? You just can't. So thank you to each of you, and thank you, Marcus. Today's Hash Church has been I feel the spirit of the cannabis plant so very present in all of us here today. And thank you for bringing us together. Thank you to each of you for sharing who you are with me and all of us who are listening.
Thank you very much. Wade Laughter. We should conclude with your name. And that still there's always social justice work to do. That doesn't change yet. 10,000 years more, we will evolve. I'm confident.
There you go. Well, I look forward to seeing all you who are going at the Emerald Cup in a couple of weeks. I don't get out much, so all of you listening and then those of you here, it'll be great to see a lot of you.
You'll see Forrest and Wade running around together quite a bit.
Yay. Much love, you guys. Much, much love. Deep love and admiration and respect. Thank you.
Well, it means a lot coming from you, Val, let me tell you.
Absolutely. been a privilege talking to you all.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming in. We've rocked a solid 3 hours on this Sunday morning, now afternoon. Although I think, Hilary, you've probably been in afternoon for most of Hash Church.
Yeah, I'm in Ottawa.
Ottawa. Well, thank you, Hilary, for coming and sharing. And
thank you. Such a pleasure. I have been on the road for a long time and it can be a little lonely, and I got to like hang out with family and friends today. I feel very connected and re-inspired, filled up.
Wonderful. Thanks, Forrest, as always. Powerful stuff, man. Gets you thinking, gets you thinking a little bit differently from maybe the regular way of thinking in this community, where we can get caught up in some of the, well, we can just get hypnotized, like in any community, I guess, with, you know, these different things of less importance when we should be sharing a little bit of our time on things that are a little bit more important. So I do appreciate you also.
Cannabis has depth. That's all. You know, you can focus on a lot of aspects of it. You know, it's just the area we're focused on is intense, so it's not always fun to talk about when you're enjoying the fun parts of cannabis. But it's because of that it gets forgotten sometimes. So it's good to bring up and keep on our focus. That this plant is amazing, and how we can be involved with it is so diverse that you could spend your whole life working in cannabis, and this happens quite a bit, and not hit all the different aspects of how it's interacting with people's lives. So really appreciate you giving us an opportunity to speak about where our focus is and how it can be integrated into all the different areas that cannabis is involved in our lives. So appreciate it very much.
Yeah, beautiful.
We would like to give thanks for the opportunity to have a connection to a plant, and having a sacred plant medicine to be able to connect with, and having that love for herbalism and that connection to the earth is really, really important to us. And even when it comes to you know, birth and midwifery and just being a natural person on earth, you know, it takes a lot of kind of guts almost sometimes. So seeing everyone here today really gives us infinite inspiration. So I'd just like to personally give you a big virtual hug right now, and really, really tell you just from the bottom of our heart, we truly appreciate you, and really we would do anything for all of you and anyone else. So that's the inspiration that'll keep us moving forward. That's the type of inspiration that's going to change laws, and we do have no choice but to continue our work, whether the law supports it or not. So that's a reality, and that will be something that we'll figure out. So we'll do it together. Lots of love. Many blessings.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dragonfly Earth Medicine. Thank you, Wade and Kirk. I know you had to leave and then you came back. We're glad you did. And Skunkman Sam, you came in late, but we're happy that you did. It was good to hear your voice. And yeah, I think I'm probably going to rock another one of these next Sunday. We'll see what happens. But thank you all so much, including the people all watching and listening right now and continuing this conversation. Cannabis, or as my Rasta friends would say, Ja is great. Peace out, everybody.
Peace. Thank you.
Blessings and love.